The meeting will come to order. Today is Thursday, August 29th, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the regular meeting of the Newburgh Board of Education. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Fred Stewart.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stand a moment's silence, please. Thank you.
Roll call.
Ms. Christine Bello,
Here.
Ms. Thomasina Bello,
Here.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher,
Here.
Ms. Victoria Boucher,
Here.
Mr. Bugarelli,
Here.
Mr. Duray,
Present.
Mr. Howard,
Here.
Ms. Politti,
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Can I have a motion to approve the district clerk pro tem?
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Thomasina Bello,
Yes.
Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard, Mr. Politti, Ms. Politti,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart. And Christine.
Yes.
Get used to this. This is going to happen a few times this evening. So.
Mr. Howard?
Yes, Madam President, I hate to keep doing this every meeting, but until we can address it at the policy level, I would like to make an adjustment to the agenda and move 12.1 up with 3.1 to allow the people from the public to speak earlier as opposed to waiting to the end of the meeting.
So, okay, so you're moving non-agenda up to with,
Yes.
can I have a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Politti,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart, Ms. Christine Bello,
No.
Ms. Thomasina Bello.
No.
The motion passed.
Okay, and so I turn it over to the public hearing on our district safety plan to Mr. Gerasi.
First test. Okay. Good evening, Madam President, Deputy Superintendent Peterson, Dr. Manning Campbell, the trustees, those here tonight and those watching at home. Before I begin the presentation, I do want to just thank everyone sitting on the dais for your continued support when it comes to safety and security. In my very short tenure, you've demonstrated your commitment to making sure that safety and security is a priority. And you've done that through the approval of purchasing equipment, technology, making sure when it comes to personnel requests that we're fully staffed. So I truly do appreciate that from everyone on the dais. The district-wide safety plan is a document that's 47 pages, 15 of which is the public health disease outlines if something like COVID was to happen again. So it's a sizable document. The reason why I'm here tonight at the public hearing is, as many of you know, we're required by statute, if we're going to make any amendments to the district-wide safety plan, there has to be a public hearing, which we're complying with this evening, and it also has to be published for the public to view the draft version for 30 days. We're also compliant with that. For the past 30 days, it's been posted on the district website. So if I could just, I'm sorry, who's got the clicker?
Just tell me when to go.
Okay. now would be a perfect time. So as mentioned, it is a voluminous document, 47 pages. I promise you we're not going to go page by page. I'm going to highlight some overarching amendments. There's 5 substantive changes that I believe took place in both form and content. So I'll let the presentation catch up with me. But the first one is the elimination of the alert team and the creation or the existence of the district-wide safety team. They're really one and the same. When you look at the prior document, it was a little confusing, and some of the objectives of that team were a little overstepping in their boundaries and really weren't met on a yearly basis. So this just cleans up the document, makes it simple, uses concise language. Number 2 is that the district now, by regulation, must conduct trauma-informed drills, and there's newly established rules and regulations surrounding that. So we'll identify that tonight as well. The third substantive change is that we have to clearly now identify a chief emergency officer. We also changed the format in which the district outlines the emergency situations that are of prime importance. And then we moved away from aspirational language and generalization. So I have an example of that. I don't know. Do you want me to wait for the presentation or? Number 3?
He's almost there. He's almost there.
Almost there. Can you go back one, please? Okay. So this is an example, right, when I talk about aspirational language or generalizations, the original sentence said, threat assessment team members all shall receive appropriate training. It now says in the suggested edit, threat assessment team members receive specialized training in comprehensive school threat assessment guidance, also known as CSTAG, in which they learn how to improve risk identification and support behavioral threat assessment and violence prevention efforts in respective schools. So this is just an example of, in the document, there was a number of things that were outlined that were aspirational, what we want to do or we shall do, or they were just in general terms. So we wanted to clearly communicate to the school community, to the board, and everyone involved that, no, this is exactly what we do when it comes to behavioral threat assessment. This is the training that we want everyone to have, and this is why. So that's just one clear example of some of the edits. If you could just advance the next slide, please. Also, as part of state regulation, we have to designate a chief emergency officer. The superintendent does that. She has designated my position, the director of safety and security, as the chief emergency officer. I won't read the rest of that paragraph, but the highlighted text is also part of the new regulation, and it governs how we must conduct trauma-informed drills. And I will read that on the next slide. Well, it'll be the next slide. So, no, you can go back. You can go back, please. So another, I wouldn't say a major change, but when you look at the document, it just clearly enumerates who's on the district-wide safety team. In the past, it was just boilerplate language about who may serve on the team. This here clearly identifies who is serving on the team. I know the font is small, may be hard to see, but there's a number of district personnel, high-level personnel in strategic positions that will sit on the team, as well as community stakeholders. There's a parent organization, a father from a parent organization is sitting on the board as well, the team, I'm sorry. And then the last bullet point there is a student representative. So the state allows the board to appoint a student representative. It doesn't have to be by name tonight, just by approving this document. That will be your approval for a student to sit on the team. They just aren't allowed in those confidential conversations with specific building plans. Also, in between the parent organization and the student, you'll see that every municipality that we're situated in, the emergency services contained in those municipalities, police, fire, EMS, they're also on the team, as well as the 3 union leaders within the district. If you could advance the slide, please. So this is the amendment to the Commissioner's Regulation effective July of this year, 2024. You know, we already were doing this as a district, but now it's just codified for the rest of the state. And I will say, as the 10th largest district in the state, as you all know, probably better than me, many people look to us for the things that we're doing. not only in the region, across the state, nationally, but recently, even internationally, what we're doing with the Yonder pouches. So we were in a very good position before some of these regulations. We just have to codify it now. So this is, I'll just jump to the last definition there, trauma-informed drills, right? It says that we can't use props, actors, simulations, or other tactics intended to mimic a school shooting, incident of violence, or other emergency, or inclusion of developmentally or age-appropriate content. So we've already approached the drills trauma-informed. We're going to continue to approach them trauma-informed. A big change as far as a district procedure, if you could just advance the slide, please, is we now have to notify the parents within 1 week. So the district already was communicating at the beginning of the year about our drills, but this new regulation says that we have to do notifications, and it specifically says the bottom of this slide is an excerpt from the actual draft version of the safety-wide plan. It's section 5, training, drills, and exercise. It now states parents or persons in parental relations will receive advance notice of each drill being conducted the week preceding any such drill by utilizing school messenger. So we had to codify the fact that, yes, we're going to do this and how we're going to do it, right? Not everyone uses school messenger, so that's specific to us here in this, the city of Newburgh. If you could just advance the slide. So the drills now, state regulation, must be conducted on different dates, days of the week, and times of the day. Must be, as I mentioned, conducted in a trauma-informed, age-appropriate manner. We're not to use props. And then the last bullet point there, drills must be announced. We were already doing this. So when it's a lockdown, we say in the beginning, this is a drill, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. This is a drill. So once again, we're just making sure that's part of our written procedures. If you could advance the slide, please. When you talk about lockdown, there's actually 5 standard response protocols. They're listed here with the corresponding picture. This is a document that New York State has created. So we just wanted, this is our procedure. This was already hanging in the classrooms without the visual imagery. So now the fact that it's been updated, we want to update it in the schools. We have printed 1,000 copies of these. So they're going to be posted in all of each of the 700 classrooms that we have and common areas. We've printed them in English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, Arabic, and Chinese as well. So when you look at this, this will be changing July of 2025, but that's for next year's presentation. But you have shelter in place, hold in place, evacuate, lockout, and lockdown, also known as the shell procedures. So the fact that this is what we do, it's hanging in the classrooms, I just wanted to communicate that and put it in the district-wide safety plan. If you could just advance the slide, please. So the only other noticeable difference, and this really isn't a change in content, it's a change in form. It was a little cumbersome the way it was listed. We have to identify, there's 4 hazard categories: civil disturbance, environmental emergency, building failure, and medical emergency. And then there's corresponding types of emergencies. So we just created this table, and then we created an appendix. So the appendix tells the reader step by step, under these circumstances, what you should be doing in those emergencies. So that was the only other real noticeable change. If you could just advance the slide. So as you see, the district-wide safety plan really involves a number of people to make this happen. Every single scholar, every faculty member, every visitor really plays a part in safety and security, and we ask that everyone's an active participant in that safety and security. It also requires collaborative partnerships with stakeholders in the community and partnerships with our 3 municipalities and our partners in emergency services. But I would be remiss if I didn't, and I'm glad there's a few in the room, I'd be remiss not to publicly recognize the school security monitors, because that is where the rubber meets the road. That's where it's executed. We can have the best policies, procedures, equipment, but it's the people that make up the security department that really create that safe learning environment on our campuses. So I just want to publicly recognize and let them know from where I sit, I appreciate their professionalism and their attentiveness each and every day to make our scholars safe. So with that, thank you. So with that, I don't know if I take any questions as part of the public hearing. Yes, sir.
should also be on that list. I think it was in the policy. Thank you, Ray. On the list for members being on the statewide safety, district-wide safety team, shouldn't a school board member also be on that?
We could definitely add it. I don't know.
I think it's in the policy.
It is, yeah.
Okay. We can add it to the enumerated list.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the public?
Yes, sir.
Anyone? Mackenzie?
Do we do like quarterly reviews of this? Because I know and I apologize for my voice, I'm currently sick, but last year there was a few incidents that happened. And did we do like a review of how those incidents worked within our safety plan? Does the team review that? And then do we like have a session of like, here's what we can do to improve if something were to occur again?
So that's a great question. That one of the reasons why we changed the alert team and just made it simple to the district-wide safety team is that previously it stated that the alert team had to review and debrief every single incident of violence. When you look at the definition of violence, there's a number of things that occur on our campuses. It was unreasonable. Now the way the suggested document before you sits today, the district-wide safety team has to, by mandate, by regulation, review those incidents and debrief them within 5 days. So you have my word that we will approach that with fidelity and make sure that we are debriefing those large-scale incidents. Yes?
I also just want to respond, when there is a large-scale incident or concern that does happen on one of the campuses, we do debrief as a team, the building safety, the principal, before we do have a large-scale event. Mr. Gerasi and his team do the scales and the safety for the area. So even as we sit, this assessment was done and things were changed to maintain safety throughout the district.
And the district-wide safety team will be meeting 10 times throughout the year. So beginning in September. And then, yes, that would be part of the discussion.
Victoria?
Hi, so thank you for this. I know you had mentioned in drills what your response to the families and parents are. If, God forbid, something were to happen, what is your response to families? What is your turnaround time for letting them know?
I'd be careful about a turnaround time. You know, it would be immediate. I'm a parent of 3 school-age children. The district-wide safety plan doesn't outline it, but it does outline the procedure, that we will use school messenger in each one of those hazard types, and how we respond to emergencies. So I work very closely with Dr. Sklar's in the communications department and the building principals. So I would be cautious to give a specific time, but I would say immediate because that's the most appropriate response, notifying parents.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So, Mr. Gerasi, thank you for this presentation. So one of the areas I know that came into question quite a few times in the past previous years when we have situations like this is the importance of when we have like a shelter in place, a hold in place, and the importance of parents not to come to the buildings because of the chaos that can cause, but more importantly, binding down the phone lines. How do we address that? How do we get that to the parents, and how do we get them to understand it? Because at the end of the day, if you're a parent and your child is in a building, that goes out the window.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that? Because I know that has been a problem in the past, but what do we do to explain the importance of what that shell means and what should happen at each phase of that shell acronym?
I think we have to, it's incumbent upon us to communicate to our families and maybe hold town halls. In the past, I've done that in districts I've worked in and cities I've worked in where we've held town halls and invited the parents so they clearly understand what the procedures are and how we respond. And that's part of the ask, that you don't come to the school, right? And that's one area I know that we have to improve upon is the reunification as well. Because at some point we do potentially want the parents to come, pick up their children. So that's part of the reunification training and focus.
Part of that, the importance of that is explaining to the parents, explaining to the public what not doing what we ask, how that can cause more of a more chaos. And like I said, it's a hard conversation, but I think it needs to be had and needs to be done to the minute level and build it up and make sure people understand what that is all about.
Yeah, I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know, but high emotions, low rationale, especially dealing with children and your child, you want to get to them. You want to make sure they're okay. So we can ask, but I understand why they would want to come, but we can definitely do a better job of clearly communicating, how that may interfere with what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Ms. Peterson?
So previously last year, we did hold a community day on Saturday where we did go over some of the child procedures and different things. However, we know that in terms of district communication, there needs to be collaboration with FACE to make sure that our parents understand, and also because we serve a multilingual district, that's also in consideration when we do some of these town halls as well.
So just to follow up on that, last year we held a CRAVE event with the Sheriff's Department from, I want to say, the town of New Windsor, I believe. And it was on a Saturday. I really do wish more parents came out. We advertised it in great detail, and we will partner with Mr. Gerasi and do this event again this year, because what was really great about the event was that the Sheriff's Department was really explicit, and they really explained why it is imperative for parents to listen to the school district and to understand that we are trying to keep everyone safe, and rushing to the school is not always the best idea because they may not be aware of what exactly the emergency is. So we will hold some CRAVE events this year, and we were able to do so in Spanish and English as well.
Ms. Burks?
Is there a plan set in place for when parents do show up? Because they're gonna show up. So what's gonna happen when they do? We all know why we shouldn't. We all know it's a safety procedure and so on. But every parent in this room gonna show up because you're not thinking about it. You're just thinking about being there to save your kid.
Yeah.
So is there a plan in place for when parents do show up? What do you guys do then? Because they're gonna show up.
So we're going to rely on our law enforcement partners. Obviously, if it's a real emergency, there's going to be an inner perimeter and outer perimeter established. And this even comes to play with first responders, who there's a term called self-dispatch, where more people show up than we need them to show up at one location. And then it's hard, if it is an emergency, to get those ambulances to get the patients to the hospital. So it really does hamper and interfere with operations. So it's not going to be, to answer your question, it's not going to be written in the district-wide safety plan, but there is a plan in place, and we rely on our partners in law enforcement to create that perimeter and make sure that no one's coming in and no one's leaving. That shouldn't be. Yes, Carla.
So, being honest with you, London is all I have. I'm showing up. So, what would you have in play to have me not show up? Like, what?
I'll go on the record and say, if you show up, you're going to get a hug from me. Going to get a hug from me.
Okay.
We'll deal with it. We'll deal with it together.
Okay.
I think the important piece is that we're in this together. You care about your children. We care about your children. I think that's the common ground. We're going to make sure they're safe. All right. And the hug, too.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask, so knowing that if something like this does occur, is there a place where parents know that they can go, where they're going to be informed, immediately, like
Yes.
the same way you would at any type of emergency?
So every campus has their own building level emergency plan. Those are confidential. They're filed with the local fire department, police department, state police, and then obviously with the building. So those locations are already outlined. So we know exactly if something were to happen at one campus, we know where we're going, right? So that's not going to be, provided to the public at this moment. But when there is an emergency, and if there's, for any reason, there needs to be an evacuation, then we would communicate that to the parents. And then there would be a reunification process that would take place on that campus.
So basically, if something were to happen at the schools, instead of parents coming to the school, they know that there's this designated place that they need to go.
Yes.
They're gonna get informed immediately about what's going on with their children.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Peterson?
So we're hearing that better communication about the time. So we're hearing that as well in terms of just parent resources. I'm sure Dr. Freeman Mack is hearing that as well, to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to reunification and just the process.
You got a question?
So is this safety plan for just while the students are in school and not at school events?
No, this covers school events on the bus to and from the school, as well as during the school day.
Games, basketball games?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That public hearing is closed. So I turn it over to Mr. Bear to go over our code of conduct.
I watched people struggle with this, and here I am. I thought it was easier than it looked. Okay. Or it looked easier than it is. I'm on, right? So good evening, Madam President, members of the board, executive team, the public both here and at home. This idea of a public hearing for the code of conduct really is in the eye of the beholder. By law, we need to do a public hearing anytime we make changes to the code of conduct. For 2 years now, we really haven't made any changes, any substantive changes. So should we do a public hearing? Should we not do a public hearing? There's something I'm going to introduce tonight that I think the board needs to see and the public needs to see. So we decided to do it this way through a public hearing, even though there are no substantive changes or changes in content to our code of conduct. And I'll explain that in a second. I also noticed the intention that the 24-25 code of conduct, both in English and Spanish, as well as something I'm going to introduce tonight, were both sent. They were intended to be on the board tonight. I just looked, they're not there. I noticed there's nothing for me to present publicly, but they will be in the morning. What's important to know is that nothing has changed with regard to content, right? What you're going to see is when it goes up tomorrow, you're going to see it say 24-25 instead of 23-24. It's going to have you as the board members instead of the outgoing board members from last year, and you'll see changes only in the DASA coordinators as well as the DASA liaisons, because obviously we've changed roles, we've had new administrators. So those are the only changes that will be seen in the 24-25 code of conduct. There's nothing substantively different, all right? So just be clear, it's not my intent to not, do this, but I would have hoped you at least saw the aesthetics of that, and we'll make sure they're up in the morning. Just as a way of historical context, a code of conduct is a requirement in the law. It was introduced back in 2001 when, shortly after Columbine, the New York State Education Department issued the SAVE legislation. I don't even remember what SAVE stands for, David. Safe Schools Against Violent Education. Okay, essentially that's what it was. There's a host of requirements under the SAVE legislation that were introduced back then, one of which is what Mr. Gerasi just presented to you, which is both building and district-wide safety plans. There's a litany of things that districts need to do, one of which is the code. So I'm not necessarily here to talk about the code, or, because as I said, there's no changes, but we did this year, we have a SAFE committee. We met maybe 5 or 6 times this year. And what was missing when we went back and looked at the SAFE legislation back in 2001, the one component of that code that was missing was the requirement for a short form or a summary. Our code, as we've been told many times by our families, you need a doctorate to read it. It's a little verbose. And I'll get to that in a second about maybe some shifts we'll make there. It reads like a penal code, to be honest with you. It's heavy, it's long, it's a little difficult for some families. It doesn't have lay information or lay language in it necessarily. But the requirement in the law is that we have a short form that at least takes the most salient or essential details out of the code so families can give a quick read, and if they want to go a little further with it and see the longer expository of a certain part of the code, it references the page numbers, they can go to do that. We try to do a one-pager, try to take 51 pages and reduce it to one, and make sure all of the essential details were in there. It came out to, and this is what it looks like, just so you know. And it's essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. So we did our best. We spent a lot of time deciding what needs to be in the short summary and what needs to not be in the short summary. We looked at other districts throughout the region, including White Plains as one example of where we looked to see what their one-pager, or they don't really have one-pager either, and we really wanted to make sure. And the committee really spent time on what do you make sure is in when so much is important, and what is the essential information parents need if they want to just use this instead of the code in order to at least understand what might be happening to their children. All right, so I'm going to give you all a copy if you just go around. And I stick through here just so you can see it. Let me pass it down this way. And again, I apologize it's not on the board tonight, again, but it will be there in the morning. So essentially what we did is we took the areas that we thought important. One is the definition of the code, the rights and responsibilities. We thought that was very important that both parents, students, and the educators know what the rights and responsibilities are. As to what Mr. Gerasi said, our obligation is to make sure we maintain safe and orderly school environments, and we take safety as our most paramount responsibility. So in that, you have to make sure that there's an understanding of what responsibilities that each parents and students have. It mentions attendance. We thought that was an important component. And then we really talked about the first 13 pages of the code. If you look at the website, really 14 pages are geared towards prevention and intervention. What do you do to prevent students from necessarily doing things they shouldn't do, misbehaving in school? And then the rest of the code, really the next 37 pages are all about the infractions. So we want to make sure that we at least captured some of the positivity in terms of how we're supposed to support students and give them what they need, hopefully that they will not want to either prevent or do an act that they shouldn't do or prevent it in the future. It goes on to sort of talks about just what student discipline is, where it applies. One of the things that we're very clear on is that there's law in this, and David can speak to that more than I can, that some behaviors do extend beyond the school. So what students do in their neighborhood, what they do in extracurricular activities, maybe even doing on, as we know now, electronically through social media, can have impact, and we have the right to investigate and possibly consecrate as a result of these circumstances beyond the day or the school. Yes?
Mr. Bayer, when will these be available for the public?
So I'll explain that in a sec, okay? It goes on to talk about teacher removal, which is one of the things that was introduced in the state legislation. It gives the parents, the teacher permission under very strict circumstances to remove a child who is disrupting the educational environment for that teacher. And so it's really nothing new. We just simply took what was in the code and just reformatted it to make sure it fits this. We talk about the right of families to have and students to have alternative education while they're suspended, and as well as how the Dignity for All Act, to make sure that we understand that we take bullying very seriously. To explain a little bit more, this code will be available. We just sent it to the printer last week. They will be available for the first day for all of the students, because by law the students should have the code, the full code as well as the short version. And we hope to have as many, I made something like 12,000 copies, so we'll have enough for families as well. Again, it's important this will be on the website tomorrow, it'll be live for anybody who wants to review it in greater detail. So one more thing I'd just like to say, and then I can certainly take questions. We have discussed very openly with the SAFE Committee, and Dr. Manny Campbell has spoken very openly with us about some questions about how the code is currently written. There's certain language that we have learned is somewhat criminalizing language that mirrors too closely to the penal code. We are an educational institution. We are not the prison system. We are not the courts. And for us to mirror that too closely, and we talk a lot in urban education about the school to prison pipeline, our system should not align ourselves to a system that we don't want our students and our families to interact with, right? So a good example of that is you'll see in the code the word reentry. So when a student is suspended both short-term or long-term, we always do reentry meetings. Reentry is actually a penal term. It's what's used when a person is incarcerated and upon leaving that prison, they do a reentry meeting. It seems benign, right? But it's a word taken from the penal system. Words like even infraction and violation are words that we have to be careful of. Those all come under. If you have a superintendent's hearing and maybe there's going to be a compromise, right? And if you choose to do certain things, we're going to reduce your suspension. We'll put those extra days in abeyance. That's from the penal code. So we are become very too comfortable with using language that has no place in the educational system. And that's exactly the kind of thing we don't want our students to be necessarily getting too comfortable with, because that's not a world that we want our students ever to be introduced to. So Dr. Benny Campbell, through Dr. Sklar's, has put out to the community interest in anybody, families, parents, community members, students especially, because we think student voice is especially important, as well as teachers and administrators, to come together this fall, and we're going to do a deep dive into the code. We're going to look at where maybe we didn't mean to, but we did have criminalizing language. We're going to look at why our code is so prescriptive. I think some love it because it seems very granular, except again, if you pick up a penal code, violation 3214 tells you what it is and whether a person can get 1 to 5 years. Our code kind of looks the same in terms of, whether to what level we can suspend based on the severity of the infraction. So we understand the importance of clarity in the code, but we have to be careful that it didn't take on a form that connotates something that to me is somewhat concerning. So I think student voice is important in this. They're the ones living with this code of conduct. We have many kids who come forward and tell us that we want to be safe, and sometimes we don't feel safe, and we have other kids who tell us, I don't get a break. I mean, I walk through the door and I'm already in trouble before I even, take my backpack off. So it's important that we understand how they're perceiving the code and how they're interpreting it and how it's being used either to help them or in some cases maybe without intention hurting them. So look forward to that. Again, Dr. Sklar's, I don't know, now that I made a public announcement, you might get more interest, but we invite as many as people as possible to really sit down. I don't think it'll be one day, maybe a few days, to really break this apart, look at what we like, see where we need to make some adjustments. And by the time we're done, you'll have a public hearing with an actual new code, hopefully, that meets the expectations of our community.
Ms. Peterson?
Just as a point of clarity, the actual code in the long form is attached tonight on the board agenda.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, I couldn't find it.
Yes, Madam
And it says
Deputy.
2425, I panicked.
Yes,
I was like, wait a minute.
Deputy. It's on the code, and the
Okay.
short form is something that will be available.
Okay, thank you. I feel relieved.
Mackenzie?
So just to clarify, the 12,000 copies you printed, are they being mailed? Are they being given to students on the first day of school? Do parents have to call for them? How are they being distributed?
Good question. So by law, we need to distribute these to all students. So we have worked with our building principals to create a venue by which they are given. It's not simply just handing them out, when they come through the metal detector, or maybe give out 30 copies to the science class. We need to do something a little bit more elaborate, a little bit more organized. So some buildings do it on the first day, some do it as part of an assembly. Depends on the size of the building, the developmental level of the building. Obviously, high school, for example, NFA Maine has 2,500 students. Usually they do grade level assemblies, or and when they give it out, we have a Spanish edition as well, so we have to make sure we have enough for both. There's the expectation that it be signed by the parents. So that's always the hard part. We give out the 12,000, it's getting them back signed so the parents have committed to, again, in the short form you'll see the rights and responsibilities, right? That they are saying that they're going to hold their children accountable to the code as it's written. So that's always, but we do have a process in place to make sure that we do this more explicitly. It's not a matter of something we stick, in a box somewhere you can pick up when you feel like it. And that will include the short form as well this time, to make sure we don't require any families to sign off on the short form. because the long form is really the first piece that they're supposed to be given by law. This is value added, in my opinion.
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Chris, for this presentation. So understanding the importance of this code of conduct and the importance of parents having access to it. I know we're saying we're giving it to the students, but we know that sometimes what we give to students never makes it home to the parents. But is there a follow-up? If, like, do we have a list that we gave student number 2, code of conduct, we don't have the return from the parent? Is there a follow-up process where we want to ensure that all parents are have access to this code of conduct? Because at the end of the day, when things go down, we're referring to the code of conduct, and where the expectation is that parents have a copy of these documents at home. So the follow-up is the first question. Second question, knowing that we have a high influx of new students, new families to the district, I'm going to assume that when they come to registration, that this is part of the packet that they get, correct?
It's a good question. I would have to research that. I don't know, Ms. Peterson, if you're aware of it.
As a part of the registration part, we do go over certain things. This is something, the short form is something definitely that can be added. There's different guides that we do send, so we definitely can send the short form or the long form electronically. Depending on the registration process, parents may or may not be seen in person. So it's something I can speak with Dr. Cloyd to incorporate.
And to the second part of your question, Mr. Howard, it's a good one. It's something we've grappled with. Our SAFE committee, Dr. Freeman Mack has been part of it, about getting them back. I think the answer to that is depending on the size and complexity of the buildings. I think elementary doesn't struggle with this as much. If you're a smaller building, as you move up, as you get to the high school, we have to, we've talked about it, we need to tighten up our systems to how do we get it back. I think it's important maybe to work with the FACE division to figure out multiple ways to put it in the family's hands, to not just rely upon that one time. We know the students notoriously, I was maybe one of those students when I was a kid, may not give parents things I don't want them to read. So we recognize that. We've discussed this. The logistics of this are a little complex, and it's something that I think we're going to revisit in the fall.
Ms. Burks?
Can there be something like a time frame that would require the parents to sign it and bring it back? Because this year it may happen like previous years. The parents are either not getting them, or two, the parents are not reading them. And speaking as a parent, I got the code of conduct when you guys sent it out. I think it was maybe Tuesday night. That thing is so long. The language, like you said, is so robust. It's so much. They're not, and I'm not, it's not that they're illiterate or anything, but that was so much for me to read. And I skimmed over it sitting at my son's football practice, because that's the only free time that I had to be able to skim over it. Parents are working. They're coming home from 2, 3 jobs. Everybody's busy. Who's sitting with this big old packet? And it's not to say that they don't care, but it's very overwhelming for them to try to sit and skim through everything to make sure that they're getting every key point to make sure that their child is safe. Also, if the parents are not returning it, because some parents are not signing it and returning it, and it's not because they don't want to. Again, parents have a lot on their hands, they're busy. So maybe we could put in that it is a requirement that you return to school, because you not signing this is saying that you are not aware of your child's safety. As a school, how do I take that on my hand? Because if something happens to your child, you're going to say, well, why didn't you sign the code of conduct? Well, I never got it.
Yeah, I think to your point, we had a parent who sat on a committee for a few times, and her comment was, I have 3 degrees, including a doctorate, and when my child got in trouble and I got the code, I was extremely intimidated. I didn't even know where to start, how to read it, what to interpret. I don't think a code should not work on behalf of the families that are intended to work with us with that code. It should be put in user-friendly terminology, it should be family-friendly, and it should also be something the student can understand. It is a very verbose document. We recognize that. And I don't want to disparage the SAFE committee. They worked hard to design that document. It took many years to get it where it's at. It was well-intended. They also looked at multiple states. They used the Denver Code of Conduct especially as one of their guides. But again, like anything, whether it met the mark at one point, it's important to revisit this because this is so important in the health and safety of our community.
Ms. Boucher?
Is there a way to provide, like if we have a parent app, a digital signature option?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
A digital signature option, like if there's a parent
That's a
portal
good,
app
you know, we
that
can
it
talk
could be
about how that
uploaded?
will look. We recognize this, like it's one of the areas we have openly realized is an area of improvement.
Ms. Politi?
Thank you. So I just read through this as we were speaking about it, and I think this is a wonderful, shortened, user-friendly version. But I also concur with Ms. Burks that as a busy parent myself, this is, I think, one of those things, putting in my teacher cap on, that we're just going to have to drill home. We're going to have to keep repeating it. So maybe we send it home with the kids. Maybe we distribute it again and have a talk about it at open house. We talk about it again at parent-teacher conferences. When there is an infraction, code of conduct is again brought up and explained to parents. I feel like that's the way that we're going to hit home with it.
Yeah, and I can just say something because I think this is important. Dr. Freeman Mack and I have a lot of conversations about this. This is a moral issue for us in that, sometimes this code doesn't matter until it should matter, right? Suddenly, you never even knew it existed, and you get a call, your child did something in school. That's a hard time to start unraveling this. And even in the penal system, if you come before a judge, you get help to break it down, right? The code is a lot more flexible than is oftentimes realized. It's meant to be progressive in nature. We shouldn't be starting by throwing kids out of school. The state and the federal government are starting to hit hard against the idea of exclusionary tactics, about long-term suspensions. We've heard repeatedly, we just had a meeting today with our delegates and our administrators that Betty Rosa, our commissioner, has oftentimes overturned long-term suspensions when it's come before her as a commissioner decisions, because they recognize long-term exclusionary tactics are ineffective and they actually hurt kids and oftentimes permanently hurt kids. So in the code also, there's wiggle room. If you actually read it and see, based on an infraction, there's a wide range of options available to the administrator, the principal, who is determining whether there should be some form of consequence. Parents should understand that. So when they're sitting and they have the right to confront the administrator based on the alleged infraction, to know, wait a minute, did you really look at this? Did you see that? You could have done this. Why did you do that? And why did you choose a more severe? And not to get into a debate about it, but if you were in a court system, right? How many times you get a speeding ticket and someone says, well, these are your options? And that we get our parents in front of this and there aren't always options. And the code kind of lays this out pretty well, and I don't think our families understand that. Not that we want to start inviting debate over the consequence, but at least understand what its intention is. It's not to go to the highest form of consequence and to exclude kids. It's meant to kind of really recognize and hold kids accountable to things they have done to consecrate the behavior, not the child, right? We don't consecrate the child. But also understand that there's restitution. Again, I shouldn't use that word. That's another penal word. There's ways to restore and to learn from your mistakes, and it's our responsibility to do that. So, see, it's so easy how you don't realize how we slip right into this language.
I agree. I wanted to say one more thing. I agree. And me saying that was not meant to be more punitive, but actually to be proactive and offer this information before incidents occur.
And again, I think the FACE division has done a wonderful job of having ongoing opportunities to sit down with families and break this down. And I think this might be another topic that's worth putting on our calendar for the year.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So understanding, this is a very important document. And as Ms. Burke stated, it's an overwhelming document also. So I would like to throw out there maybe an opportunity for us as a district to get together with the FACE team and communications team and put together a presentation where we can use it as opportunities to go into the schools, elementary, middle school, high school, where you can have programs put together where they can actually act out or have a conversation back and forth where kids can understand what the code of conduct is. It can be done on a grade appropriate level, but they need to know what they can and cannot do and what the repercussions will be if you do X, Y, or Z. That right there, but then to the other level with the parents, we have to find a way to break this down to lay language. Because if it's overwhelming to some of the people that I know I've spoken with, I was always told, you make something simple enough so the least knowledgeable person in the room can understand it, then you can ensure that everybody understands it. So if we can start thinking like that, and I really would like that the program's put together, because I know it's time sensitive, I know everything's about time. But if we can put a show together, a program together, to where we can go to the different schools and have the kids come into the auditoriums and go through the code of conduct. Because you'd be surprised the amount of kids that have no clue what they can and cannot do or what they should and should not do. But it's all here in writing. And I think we should do a better job of trying to present that and letting the children and the scholars know what the ramifications are if you do X, Y, or Z. Just a suggestion.
And in that spirit, I encourage you to read the first 14 pages. That's really what the heart of education should be focused on how are we preventing and supporting our kids so they don't make these mistakes, or at least they don't repeat these mistakes. We have heavily invested, and I've publicly described some of the activities that we've taken on in this district to really build up our preventative programs. We're actually looking at a program that was brought to our attention through High Tech High in California. That's an online program that I believe has power to helping kids to, through a behavioral cognitive approach, rethink the decisions they made and learn how to do differently the next time. So we'll talk more about that, because I think I'm going to have to bring that program before you as the board, so you'll understand what that is and how it will help our kids.
Ms. Boucher?
I have a question. So you were saying that they want to actually revamp the language in the code of conduct. How long do you think that's going to take? Because you're printing, from what I understand, you're printing out 12,000 copies of the code of conduct the way it's written right now. You're going to bring that to them, right, with the language that is leaning towards a criminality type of language, but we want to have something different. So if we want to have something different, how long is it going to take? And are you going to have to reprint 12,000 new copies? Because that's money. That's a lot of money.
We
right?
recognize that. Either one.
I'll start, and if I leave anything out, I know that Dr. Freeman Mack will also respond. Yes, we have to change it because it's been, we've been using parts of it that's not been pro-students for a really long time. So we put out a survey. I think we have about 60 or so names, ish, about that. We did that in the spring. And we are hoping to begin this work once school settles down, perhaps, early fall, that we can have some meetings. It is going to be a process, but the process is meant to work for pro-social behaviors, positive behaviors and outcomes for students. And if we have to reprint, we will reprint because we are here for students and that's what we have to do. So if there are portions of it that has to be done in the first few months, and if that's something that we can send to print some changes that we've made, we'll certainly bring it back in front of the community, talk about the changes that we've made, share the new additions, and perhaps it will not be the entire 51 pages, but maybe a shorter version of it, right? And multilingual accessibility to our families, but to make sure that what we are doing, we have it out there. We will not rush through it. This is really important. So it's something that, we're definitely gonna spend time looking at. We already have someone identified who we would like to begin to work on this.
The biggest thing about the code of conduct is that it is a process, and we want to make sure that our community has voices on this process. So it's not just about us coming in and saying, we're going to change this. We want to hear from our students, our parents, our teachers, our administrators, and we want to have community around what we're seeing in this document and looking at the language that is within it. So it is a process. It's not going to happen in a month. We want to take our time and really unpack it and make sure that we have the right voices at the table when we do so.
And let me respond to this question, so when it does come up, you have the answer from here. We know that everyone cannot make it to meetings, so Dr. Sklarz, I will ask that there is some sort of online platform for folks to participate as we're going through the process of the recommendations. So if folks can't make it to our sessions, or if they're not part of the committee, then there's a place where they can also access the document and make recommendations for consideration. Thank you.
Ms. Boucher?
Thank you. I know that we're trying to stay away from this verbiage, but the code of conduct essentially is our law, right? We follow a certain code of conduct. I have a 4-year-old son, and he is an exceptional learner, so I now try to look at things from a different lens. I try to see it from a different point of view. I'm saying this in hopes that, as a community, we can really focus on keeping kids in school, and I might cry because that's where I'm at with my kid. I think kids right now, from what I'm seeing, and especially with my son's environment, they're almost afraid to express themselves because they always get in trouble. And especially someone like my son, who acts out when he doesn't know what to do. And I think that by having people in leadership and knowing how children are, especially nowadays, because they are different from when I was in 2007, kids are kids, and I hope that this code of conduct can help children want to be in school and want to do the right thing and aspire to do better. I don't want them to have to look at it as a punishment, because sometimes children equate punishment with bad, and I'm a bad boy, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. And the last thing we want are kids to not want to go to school because they can't be themselves and they're punished for it. So I just want that to be something everyone thinks about when they're putting this together, because the language is weird and not everyone understands it. I don't understand some of it. But if we're expecting our kids to come to school and follow something, we have to be able to embrace who they actually are as kids.
And I think it's important, Ms. Boucher, to recognize the Code of Conduct is a K through 12 document. It is not a pre-K through 12 document. It does not apply to preschool. And there's guidance from the United States Department of Education that further clarifies. There's a lot of, I want to be careful not to give you inaccurate data, but there's something about the fact that the highest number of students who are being suspended nationwide are coming out of preschool, out of UPK programs. It's a national crisis. I'm going off script, Dr. Manning-Campbell, but I'm just going to let you know that we take this seriously. Part of it is, and I've mentioned this very publicly, the preschool process for special education right now is in a state of crisis. I have lost sleep over this. The executive team knows I perseverate over the fact that there's not enough programs for kids, there's not enough services for kids. Janet Orwick, who has recently retired, spent a year applying to New York State for us to become a preschool site. I'm happy to report today that we got the approval on Friday. We are now approved to run special class programs in Newburgh. We are starting, I'm excited, because that's what also happens. Kids are not getting what they need in preschool, and they come to our doors at 5, and they're not equipped and not ready for what is expected of them. So we're starting an 812 program in Bombville, and we're, for students with more severe developmental behavioral, not so much behavior, more developmental. And we are starting an integrated site at GAMS. It will be 18 students that will have 6 identified special education students with both a special ed teacher, a general ed teacher, and an assistant. So I'm excited, and we hope to expand that so we can take care of the problem that the county has not been able to resolve.
Ms. Peterson?
So we are excited to begin this work, and even with a shared decision-making process of our community, our teachers, and one thing that was expressed is that as a district, we need to collaborate around interventions and support. It was stated clearly during our training today from our teachers, and it's something that they know that they need to know the how. How do we do this? How do we provide preventions to support a more progressive discipline process? So we're excited, and we know that it's going to be a long process, but we are ready to do the work.
Ms. Boucher.
I just want to follow up. That's great to hear, because I can tell you as a parent, we're terrified because we don't know. Especially if you have no children and this is your first and you're learning this process, it's very scary. So I think that if parents know they're supported, I think that the interactions would be more. I think that people would interact more. Right now, a lot of parents are just scared because it's the unknown. So as long as we are working on the support for that, I think it's a great step forward. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Leamer, what?
So we're now moving into the section, comment on agenda items and non-agenda items. And what I'm reading is from Board Policy 1230.
You have to close up public hearing first.
Excuse me?
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Close the public hearing.
Okay. Before we move into public comments on agenda items and non-agenda items, the following are the boundaries and guidelines of public speaking. When called to speak, please state your name and the municipality of your residence. You will have 5 minutes to speak. I ask that you address your concerns to the board as a whole and not to individual board members. All speakers and observers must conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, defamatory statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. You cannot mention names of any individual board members, members of staff, or students of the district. We reserve the right to remove you from the podium and the meeting if you fail to comply. Thank you. So we have one person signed up for public comment on agenda items, Mr. Drew Cardigainer.
The reason I'm here is to talk on school board meeting times changed to 7 o'clock from what was 6 o'clock. Seems like a common sense change to me, and I found it strange that this small an issue makes it on the agenda of the school board. The question is, what's the big deal? But since it's on the agenda and seems to be a big deal, I have some comments. The purpose of the change is to engage stakeholders, parents of children in the school district, those interested in the success of the school district, which includes everyone living in the city of Newburgh, town of Newburgh, and town of New Windsor. They are the stakeholders of the school district, your customers. Meeting at 7 o'clock makes it easier for them to make these meetings if they want to make it. Meetings at 6 o'clock do not. The biggest reason is timing. Meeting at 7 o'clock allows people to make the meetings easier because many can't make it at 6 o'clock. Some work till 6, which includes, as I understand it, 2 of your school board members. For those who get off at 5, typical for many people who work, there really is not enough time to get here without a rush. Out of work at 5, 20 minutes to come home, decompress, eat, 20 minutes to get here. It's too much, too quick. Meetings at 6 do not give people enough time to decompress and to get here, so they don't come. And these public meetings of the school board are because you want them here to come and participate. In simpler terms, meetings at 6 o'clock cuts them out of these meetings. And then there's numbers. As a result of this being made an issue, it occurred to me to look up when surrounding school districts meet. 17 school districts in Orange County, I found school board meeting times for 16 of them. 8 school board meet at 7 o'clock. That's 50% of the total. 3 meet at 6:30, 5 meet at 6 o'clock, as does Newburgh. Then it occurred to me to look up graduation rates. Of the 8 that meet at 7 o'clock, 7 had graduation rates over 90%. Of the 3 that meet at 6:30, every one of those had graduation rates at over 90%. Of the 5 remaining that meet at 6 o'clock, Greenwood Lake does not have a high school, so there's no graduation rate. 2 of the remaining school districts had a graduation rate under 90%. Newburgh was one of them, with a graduation rate of 72%. Orange County graduation rate is 88% countywide. Newburgh is 20% below that average in the county. The point being, anything that can be done to improve the graduation rate of this school district should be done. Improving the engagements of parents with this school board, where parents can make it to school board meetings and participate, should be tried. And moving the board meetings to 7 o'clock might help, because meeting at 6 o'clock, they either can't or won't be here, and maybe, just maybe, at 7 o'clock they will. One more point of reference. Of the 7 o'clock meeting times proposed, Newburgh City Council meets at 7 o'clock, as do the town boards of New Windsor and Town of Newburgh. These are the 3 major sources of Newburgh school district students. Finding that out, it occurred to me to check other city, town, and village board meeting times. 44 distinct municipalities in Orange County. Of those 44, 3 meet in the morning, 9:30 and 8 o'clock. 1 meets at 6 o'clock, which is Greenwood Lake, that has no high school. 6 meet at 6:30, 3 meet at 6:30. 23 meet at 7 o'clock. 14 meet at 7:30. Over 80% of the town, village, and cities in Orange County meet on or after 7 o'clock. I think the towns and villages and cities have been doing this long enough to know what works in their cities. I think the school board from Newburgh should follow their lead. And to close, anything to engage parents and stakeholders with this school district, including the timing of school board meetings, anything to hear their issues, comments, and complaints and improve this district should be tried, anything. Because moving the timing of a school board meeting to 7 o'clock should not be a big deal. The real number this school board and administration should be concerned about, instead of the timing of school board meetings, is a 72% graduation rate. 28% don't graduate on time. The worst graduation rate in Orange County. That's a big deal. Moving the school board meetings to 7 o'clock might help engage some of those parents and might make that graduation work better. Thank you.
There's no one else signed up. Is there anybody else that wishes to comment on agenda items? Can you come to the podium and give us your name, please, and the municipality that you live in?
Good evening. My name is Starla. I'm a City of Newburgh resident. As he was talking about the change at a time and the graduation rate, it makes no sense. Because our graduation rate is what it is, it's been what it is for the lack of teaching and whatever else has been going on. That has nothing to do with the time, because if you're a parent and you understand that me getting here at 7 o'clock to then go home and still tend to my children, they're going to get to bed even later than if I was to come here at 6 o'clock. So wouldn't it make more sense to leave a meeting at 6 o'clock where I don't break my children's schedule and I come here, I do what needs to be done, I then go home and be the parent that I always am even at this meeting. So that doesn't make sense. Our graduation rate is what it is because it's just been that way. And if people feel like they can't get here at 6 o'clock, as we've always, and as they've always provided, there is YouTube, so take advantage of it because that's a service that they pay for. But going on, it just doesn't make sense. Here till 7 o'clock, you go into executive session for 2 and 3 hours. You gotta, seek your lawyer, do this, do that, and a third. And some of us parents who are consistent in the community, we're here till the end. We're here, so take into consideration that we do to still work. We are stakeholders too. We work, we come here. Some of us are just getting here off of 6, even at 7. And we're rushing to get here because our children are important to us. So let's not make it seem like the graduation rate has anything to do with moving a time of a meeting that has always been at 6 o'clock. Things that are on this agenda to change is They've been the same for years since the district has been here. Why now is it a problem? Because we have a new board in place and they just don't want to come in and comply with what's already there. They have to switch it because it's a sense of control. Because if you can't change the time, you have no power and you just feel like that's a problem. At what point do you consider the parent and the child? The graduation rate is what it is. Time is what it is. We could all use an extra hour in a day. But since we ain't got that hour, let's work with what we've been doing. Stop trying to fix what is not broken and fix what is broken. Pay more attention to the things that need your attention besides a time change for a meeting. That should stay at 6 o'clock if you're going to take 2-hour executive session breaks.
Is there anyone else? Okay. So we'll move into comments on non-agenda items.
There's no one signed up, so.
Ms. Burks.
Good evening. My name is Mrs. Burks. I am a resident of the city of Newburgh, also a parent of this district. My comment is on non-agenda items for the, it would be for the time, but I think someone already gave her lovely speech on why the time doesn't need to be changed. It's not fixed. It's not broken, so why do you need to fix something that's not broken? It's been like this for decades. Parents have been showing up. It's only became a problem again when this new board came in. As far as the board members that are on here that can't get here at 6 o'clock, this is a volunteer position, as many of you find it necessary to state when you can be out doing other things, because it's a volunteer position, right? So when you volunteered, you knew you knew it was at 6 o'clock. So why volunteer for something and then try to change it around? Usually when you volunteer, you're looking at what needs to be done because it fits into your time, right? So now as new board members, you're saying that you cannot commit to the 6 o'clock, so why'd you volunteer? You volunteered just to change school board meetings? Another is the school board locations. Last school board meeting, we had a resident who was actually a landlord in the city of Newburgh get up here and make a statement about people not feeling safe. Since when did people start not feeling safe? Because from my understanding, all of our children go to the same schools, right? Some of them schools are all in the city of Newburgh. Furthermore, we have parents that come down and shop in the city of Newburgh at your flower shop. We have parents that come down and party. Because I just went to Billy Joe's last Sunday with a colleague, and I can count on my finger how many people that looked like me that was down there. So you come down here, you party, right down here at the riverfront. There's bars all up and down Broadway that I even never knew existed. I could tell you who showed me them though, and none of them look like me, and none of them are gangbangers, and none of them are people that rob people, none of them are people that sell drugs. These people that show me where these bars are, I'm not even gonna get into that because then we'll do race and then you'll bang the gavel on me. But what's the point of y'all changing the meeting locations so y'all can come to our neighborhood to party, get drunk, cause whatever trouble that you cause down there. Y'all can come to our neighborhoods to shop and buy flowers. You can come to our neighborhood to teach in our neighborhood. Because y'all come here to teach, right? So y'all get paid when y'all come here, right? So you come down our neighborhood to make money, shop, drink, get drunk, party, and do all that. But you cannot come to our neighborhood because you feel unsafe coming to a school board meeting. How does that sound? Please make it make sense. You rent in our neighborhood. So you're not afraid to come down here and collect your rent, or you might do it like a lot of people do now, collect your rent online and pay a little bit. But 9 times out of 10, you come into this neighborhood to get your rent money, but you can't come down here for a school board meeting once or twice a month. I'm sick and tired of grown behind adults because they are scared putting our children on the front line. Because when you mention that it is unsafe, and I've seen the post, and I've read the post, and some of the school board members are tagged in on that post. One comment I read, we're scared to get our cars broken into. I've never heard a car getting broken into down here, not while at a school board meeting. I park my car safely every night in the city of Newburgh on my block, and it never gets broken into. And sometimes I can't find a parking space, park around the corner. My car doesn't get broken into.
Why do we need to make a statement like that? Because your big grown behind takes a job in the city of Newburgh, comes to the city of Newburgh, chooses to send your kids to schools in the Newburgh and Lark City School District, and your big behind don't feel safe. That is ridiculous. Get over it. It's really ridiculous. Y'all don't make no sense up here. Because your big grown behind is scared. Now we got to change meeting locations that's been here for decades. Y'all been to the city of Newburgh. Don't play with me. Y'all got friends in the city of Newburgh, right? Because everybody got votes from the city of Newburgh. Y'all got friends in the city of Newburgh. So y'all been down here. Y'all done party down here. Y'all done live down here. And now everybody's scared to come to the city of Newburgh. Don't make statements like that. It's insulting and it's degrading and it's shameful.
Anyone else? Ms. Fuchek.
Dawn Fuchek, Town of Newburgh. So I just want to speak, and I know I'm in the minority on this. I understand the reason for having public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and you want to be respectful of the public's time, and I appreciate that, and I think that that's wonderful, and I think that that should continue. What I would like to ask is possibly looking at the policy and adding another opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. There are people that want to leave, but the only opportunity the public has to hear your discussion and make comments on something that they may have heard is during your meeting. So if all of the public comment is at the beginning of the meeting, then we wouldn't have an opportunity to speak to something that we may have heard being discussed by you as a board when looking at the resolutions. So I would just ask that you possibly look at the policy that in addition to having those opportunities at the beginning of the meeting to be respectful of the public's time and that they can choose to leave afterwards if they would like, if you could possibly in addition add another opportunity at the end of the meeting for anyone who does stay that would like to speak to something that they heard at the meeting. Thank you.
Anyone else? So I'll turn this over to the superintendent for the superintendent's update.
Thank you. I would like to take some time to celebrate the good work that's being done across the district as we prepare for our new school year. This week, we hosted our leadership retreat. We have been receiving incredible feedback from our administrators and look forward to continuing that momentum throughout the school year. Our transitional grade levels are participating in orientation programs where students and their families are getting to know the building teams and practicing critical skills that come with a new grade band. Last night, Assemblyman Jacobson and Eakes hosted a forum for area superintendents to express their feedback related to the state's research about the foundation aid formula that helps fund our district's needs. I am thankful for their efforts to assist superintendents in receiving fair and equitable funding across the state. Next week, we look forward to welcoming every single employee in our district to join together for professional development. Although we operate in multiple buildings across several municipalities, we are one team. Being aligned is critical to educating our children. We're really looking forward to our time together next week. Last, but certainly not least, I would like to express my thanks to everyone behind the scenes who are working tirelessly to make sure our schools are welcoming to our faculty, staff, students, and families when they return to school. We are looking forward to welcoming our students, faculty, staff, and families back for a wonderful new school year. The first day of school is Thursday, September 5th. Our school bus routes have been posted earlier than ever before to help our families prepare their students for success beginning on the very first day. Thank you very much. Item 4.3. Items 4.2, 4.4 through 4.8 are presented as items for consent for your consideration this evening. Thank you.
Would anyone like to separate any out? Mr. Howard?
Yes, 4.3 and 4.5.
Can I have a motion on items 4.2, 4.4, 4.6, 4.7, and 4.8?
So moved.
And second. Discussion? Roll call?
Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Christine Bello?
Yes.
Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Item 4.3, resolution to authorize the board president to execute the 2024-2025 school comprehensive education plan. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Discussion?
Discussion?
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So we're talking about the set plan for the high school. Can we talk about what that plan is going to do to address the graduation rate at the high school? And can we talk about let me back up. What are we going to do to increase the graduation rate at the high school? What plans are in place? And how are we going to support the most struggling populations up at the high school level? We know what those numbers are. And what is the plan?
Thank you. So I'll begin, and I know that if I leave anything out, some members of my team will respond. So what are we going to do to support the students at the high school? First thing I'd like to say is that the struggle does not begin at the high school. So what we know is that we have a K-12 challenge. We know that in urban areas, we address and deal with a lot of circumstances and challenges that our scholars bring to us. We also know that even before the pandemic, we had some challenges as an urban district, and the pandemic exacerbated it a bit more. What we can also say is that we learned that we are receiving different types of students entering our school programs, particularly at the high school level. We have a lot of students who are here who may have had some interrupted education that we are now teaching in our high school program. Some of the ways that we've attempted to address, and we will continue to address these needs, through working with our dedicated teachers, through looking at data points, through looking at item analysis, looking for opportunities and the opportunity gap to ensure that we're supporting our scholars in our schools. One bold way that we have looked in supporting the written product of this set plan this school year was that the school teams, particularly the high school team of teachers and their leadership, wanted to try a smaller learning community idea. And this smaller learning community will give the scholars and teachers an opportunity to work more closely, cohesively, and have a smaller group to address. Working in this smaller learning community gives the scholars and the teachers an opportunity to get to know each other, to get to know learning opportunities, to work on thematic teaching approaches so that they know students in their team, on their team, in their small learning community, have an opportunity to talk across the team in their professional learning communities and really hone in on students as individuals, which is not something that we necessarily have been able to do because we've been teaching in a whole school model. Our teachers are doing the best that they can do, but they requested through their SEP renewal this year if it was possible for us to do a small schools. And that's what we've done in order to address some of the needs of our students. Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Dr. Manning Campbell. So I think that's all true, and I think that's really important. And I think the SEP for the high school does define those priorities. But I think it's important to understand where this comes from and how this is derived. We get every year, and Mr. Forget, I'm doing my best, Mr. Forget, to do what you do well, is to kind of break this down. It's based on the ESSA data that we inherit based on the 22-23 school year. So we don't even have the results yet for the 23-24 school year. It's based on the previous year's performance. And when you break it down, it's broken down for a variety of areas, chronic absenteeism, performance on ELA and math, and then the high school year sciences and social studies, a whole range of things. Graduation certainly is an area that is looked at, but then it's broken down by subgroups. So it does all, but then it breaks down by special education, by ELs, by economically disadvantaged. The area that came out this year for the high school was around the exceptional learners. It was around special education. Those are the areas that so while we understand the importance of graduation, we don't put that aside, but the SEP has to identify based on the categories that they indicated are areas of concern, that we have to then have priorities that are aligned to that. A lot of what I see, and my computer died, I apologize, a lot of the activities that were very intentional this year is, and I don't know the cliche well, but if you rise, what's the thing about rising boats? Right, if you do for some, you do for all. So we are looking at sort of the instructional design of our special education program. We are looking at smaller learning communities because some of our students have described that they feel somewhat voiceless and lost in some of our larger settings, and that all has impact on absenteeism and graduation. So it's important to understand where this came from. We don't get to just choose what we think is a priority. They define for us areas that we must focus on, and our SEP must be aligned to those priorities. It doesn't mean we don't also need to have plans in place for that as well.
Mr. Howard.
Yeah, so follow up to that. So, and I understand that it's about graduating every student. It's about every go back every day, and we want to do something that's going to impact the whole. But I'm glad you mentioned the subpopulations, because part of that struggling subpopulation are Black boys, the L populations, and special ed. And those are the ones that are most impacted with graduation, most impacted with instruction, most impacted with curriculum delivery. I understand the small learning environment. I love that idea. What changes are we going to specifically do to address those subpopulations? Because it's not a cookie cutter model going on here. Certain things need certain attention and resources. What are we going to do to impact the low graduation rate of Black boys? What are we going to do to increase the graduation rates of our special ed population? What are we going to do with individuals who are in the schools and English is not their first language? And how are we going to address that? I know that's a compound question, Dr. Campbell, but I know you can handle it.
So I hope I remember all of it. So those are all valid points, and I'm happy that Mr. Bayer, and I see Dr. Freeman Mack also raring to speak. So what I will say, bless you, you're welcome. What I will say is that one of the positions that you see that we're asking for tonight is a director of LOPE, languages other than English, because we understand that that is a growing population of need in our scholars One of the new redesigns that we have for our curriculum and instructional team, we have a director who is focusing on curriculum and instruction, and that's not something that we've done before. So one of the director's sole role, one of them, outside of compliance, is also to work within the curriculum and instructional team to make sure that curriculum and instruction, there are points of accessibility for all of our scholars. And we have to make sure that we use data-designed instruction to make sure that the curriculum is accessible at multiple points. We can't have an entry point for everyone at the same place because we have to have different expectations and differentiate our instructional approaches. So looking at the subgroups, using data, using professional learning communities, otherwise known as PLCs, using that time built into the schedule to make sure that we're having data-driven conversations about individual students. So that's the difference. That's what we're doing that's different this year. The smaller learning community gives us an opportunity to have 2 school counselors, a social worker, a psychologist, working within a house structure, 3 school counselors, working within a house structure to make sure that we are intentional in how we look at students and their learning styles and abilities, making sure that we are providing the small intensive support that our scholars need, looking at designing programs, not because it's what we've done, right, but making sure that we are getting students where they need to be with the appropriate courses that they need to have. You will notice that we focused a lot of our intention on coaches, ensuring that we provide supports for teachers. We have exceptional learner coaches, we have literacy coaches. We wanted to make sure that teachers and students felt supported and had different best practices to ensure that our scholars are learning. What did I miss? Anything else?
No, you touched it, but if I may.
Yes.
We've had conversations around. We know that the issue does not start at high school level. The high school inherits issues. So what's the deeper dive to get kids ready to excel at the high school level so they can come there ready to learn, ready to go there for the 4 or 5 years, whatever that may be, and walk across Academy Field and get those diplomas? Because we know the issues don't start in 9th grade.
So we know, like, when we're building a house, we have to strengthen our foundation. So we know that our foundation needs some additional supports in terms of literacy and numeracy. We know that the high school plays a unique role. Students get there at the 9th grade level, it's hard because it's catch-up because the high school teachers are really teaching content. In the secondary space is content. However, what we're noticing nationwide, that we have a literacy problem, right? So what we are doing in terms of the earlier grades, we have employed many literacy coaches to go into our schools to support teaching and learning at the very basic level, at the foundation. So the PLCs, the professional learning communities, that really is a new design in which we have employed. We're being, not that we haven't had it before, but we are being intentional in what that looks like and what the outcomes are. So our PLCs, our literacy coaches, ensuring that our literacy coaches are trained, that everyone's not doing their own thing. We're looking at consistency across our campuses in terms of what we do for data, looking at instructional focuses and our instructional goals to make sure that we are on a continuum from K-12. If you remember, we employed a director of middle level last year, and we've seen some great results in terms of the middle level director. In addition to that, we also have had Gear Up here. We have some transitional programs and really looking at how students are transitioning into the high school, bridge programs to ensure that we capture some of the skills and strategies that are necessary for high school education. You're welcome.
Ms. Peterson?
I know that when Dr. Manning Campbell speaks, she's in an educational term, but I just want to solidify some of the things that she says when we're talking about analyzing data-driven instruction. So in the very basic, so I have a high school student that may not pass their Regents exams. So how am I preparing my teachers to look at those Regents exam results and then create lessons and create interventions that can support those gaps in the student learning. And that work will happen within the PLCs, and it will happen in depth. And what our hope is, and what the high school's hope is in writing the PLC, the SEP plan, is that the smaller learning communities will also help have those deeper dives into those results. What are the best practices? What are they seeing? Item analysis to best support some of that. Also, one big thing that we have been talking about is vertical alignment. So when we have an issue that we're seeing, suppose in 6th grade, we're seeing our 6th grade results where there's writing issues, how are we then changing that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th to make sure that our students globally that are showing deficits around certain state standards, how are we modifying our curriculum to address those deficits? And that vertical alignment, because we are so large, is very difficult, and it has to be intentional. And we're hoping that the coaches that the state has provided us with the pathway to do can help us solidify those strategies and coach our teachers in the classroom side by side with students to get some of those consistent practices instructionally that work best for our students. I also know Dr. Freeman Mack worked in developing some of the steps, so there may be some things that Dr. Campbell and I left out that also may help just bring clarity in some of what changes you may see from day one.
So it's also a focus that is intentional on student engagement. Student engagement that really supports students understanding and being responsible for what it is they know and what it is they don't know. So what does that mean exactly? Students should read, should write, should read, and should write some more. So when we look at our PLCs and when we look at our explicit direct instruction, which we also call EDI, it's making sure that we're tailoring it to support the students. How are we engaging them? Are they engaged? Can they identify what it is they've learned? It's great for us to know the data and what happened and what standard and what students didn't get, but it's even more powerful and more important for a student to understand that standard and to say, well, I'm looking at this, Mr. Bear, and my introduction doesn't make any sense, or I didn't understand what that meant in that story. So it's really looking at how are we engaging students in our smaller learning communities? Do they understand what it is they need to learn? And how can literacy be more effective in our instruction? So with every single step, from Bombville to Horizons to GAMS to South Middle School and to Maine, there is a direct and intentional focus on literacy across the content area and on literacy as it relates to our special ed students and our L population as well. I think that's the best way just to add to that.
Mr. Howard.
Thank each of you for those explanations. And for total transparency and total honesty, I don't want anyone to think that I'm singling out Newburgh. This is a national problem, and it's a problem that's happening in a lot of urban communities, but I'm glad that you were able to explain what we're doing to address that, because I think it's so irresponsible for people when they come and they have questions at the microphone, or they come and they have questions in the community, and they compare Newburgh to other communities that don't look like Newburgh, our district. Because we have a unique district. And to compare Newburgh to a Valley Central, to Monroe Woodbury, to other schools like that, that's not fair. And I think it's very irresponsible. And I purposely asked those questions because I needed you to explain what we were doing to address that. So it's easy to say, compare our graduation rate and how terrible it is, but compare it to communities that look like us. Compare it to other high-needs communities. Compare it apples to apples. But thank you, ladies, so much for bringing that explanation to the community and to the board and to the people. Thank you.
May I add something, please? We've had a 2-day administrative retreat, and I just want to say this, and for the folks that are at home listening, we have to change our mindset about our students here in Newburgh. Our students are not at risk, they're at potential. And that's something that we are going to live by. And I'm going to say it again, our students are not at risk, they are at potential. That needs to be our mindset moving forward. Thank you.
Mr. Bear?
So in that retreat, we were introduced to a young man, and this is what Newburgh contends with, that I promise you is not on the radar for many districts around the region. This gentleman emigrated from Venezuela. He came through the most treacherous jungles of Central America. He had a journey here over 2 years that none of us would even imagine, and he brought his sister with him, 16 and 14. He got here speaking no English whatsoever. He didn't even believe that he should be in school, and didn't enroll in school. His sister did, he did not. They were two unaccompanied youth. I heard the story for the first time yesterday. It was amazing. So imagine how many, we have a lot of students like that who come here at 16, 17 because they're fleeing something very, very concerning to them. Oftentimes their lives might be dependent on it. And we have to educate them and put them through the same rigor as students who may have been here for 12 or 13 years. There's many of those examples here. This student was found and he was given an opportunity to come to our high school. And he's now, what, a senior? And he passed his regents. And he was brought, all of them. And Chastity Beato, who is our and world language director, brought him, I don't know the exact terminology, to Albany as part of the PRILA, which is an organization that helps our Latino families' kids learn about our government. And he got to play governor for a day. And he got to get up and give speeches, and they learned about. So I just want people to understand that example, the miracle that is, and the concerted effort by every possible corner of this district to give this kid, and he was amazing, and he should speak here if he hasn't, to tell you his story. But that's what we contend with, that oftentimes, and that's a beautiful example. We have many where kids are like, I just can't do this in 1 or 2 years. That's what we're asking them to do. They have 2 or 3 years to get a high school diploma with no English, maybe extremely interrupted education, and we're trying to find avenues that might be more non-traditional for them. So to compare us is just sometimes so insulting because we have so many more complexities that come through. We understand the literacy issues. We take them very seriously, and I think Dr. Mack talked about literacy across the content areas. That is a huge emphasis that we're now doing. So we're all seeing ourselves as reading teachers, not just the reading teachers. So, but let's not pretend that all of our students get here and have all the same opportunities that other students have in other districts. It's insulting to compare. And the things our kids do, I promise you, these kids in other districts couldn't even get 5 minutes right with the kinds of challenges they're contending with. Our kids are resilient, they endure, and they meet everything we put in front of them. And if they can't, we give them alternatives to make sure that we don't lose them to the system.
Ms. Boucher? Victoria?
You want to go first? Okay. Thank you. So I have a couple questions. I specifically printed out Bombville's because that was just my starting point. I know that there is a lot of controversy around literacy globally, specifically, and I focus on Newburgh because this is where my child will grow up. So my question is a lot of the things I hear are ARC this, ARC that, ARC this, ARC that. I hear the science of reading, I hear the curriculum. My question to you is, can we discuss what supplemental interventions we have for ARC that we are going to implement in the schools, and that ARC is not just one end-all, be-all curriculum?
Okay, I'll begin. I think everyone else here wants to weigh in. ARC. ARC is a program. The science of reading is a philosophy. ARC provides resources, and if it is used with fidelity, consistently, we see results. I'll borrow your word. It's irresponsible of us to believe that there is a program that meets all the needs of our scholars. It doesn't exist. There are positives and negatives with every single thing that we do. But as educators, we need to know where our students are and what supports we have to put in place. ARC comes with a set of resources. It does not negate teaching, understanding data, looking at where our scholars are and the needs for improvement. Now, we've seen great results in the schools who have actually implemented ARC with fidelity. There are components in ARC that are utilized that have shown great results in our schools. So to hear that, we need to do the science of reading, it's a philosophy. And so we have resources, ARC's a resource, and it helps to provide services in reading for our students. Dr. Freeman Mack.
So Dr. Noni LaSalle from Harvard created what is called the literacy briefs for the state of New York. And she started rolling them out. The state of New York started rolling out those literacy briefs in January of 2024. The science of reading is a philosophy of 50 years of research. Everything that's out there, from the reading workshop model to the writing model, it really speaks to how kids learn, and not the big five, it's the big six. And I'm going to say this with love. I would love for the board members to attend a workshop where we can unpack the science of reading together. We are doing that right now in this district as an administrative team. We unpacked 3 of the briefs at our administrative retreat. There are 7 briefs total. But I honestly believe and I firmly know where everybody's heart is, and I think it's imperative for us to all be on the same page to understand what the science of reading is and what it is not. The science of reading is not phonics. It doesn't even talk about that. There's not one way or one size to teach a child how to read and how to write. It's a relationship with both. There's SEL components, there's cultural pedagogy that's also important within the science of reading. And Dr. LaSalle really explains that and supports it. But the science of reading is not a program. It's just a philosophy of research of 50 years. That is it.
Ms. Peterson?
So, Ms. Boucher, your questions was about actual resources. What are the tools that we give our educators to instruct with reading? So we have multiple resources. Our main resource is ARC. We also supplement with Haggerty. So I know that Dr. Freeman Mack talked about phonics. That is a resource that also supports that. We also have toolkits that go along with that. For students that are in a higher tiered or in a higher need, I won't go into educational jargon, that need more, we also have the Sunday program for exceptional learners. So there are different resources along with many classroom libraries we have. We also have instructional resources, Newsella, iReady, that teachers can utilize to instruct in reading. So it's not a resource issue. We are resource rich. We have resources. What we have to do is we have to understand the science of reading. We've talked about direct and implicit instruction. We've also talked about us all being on the same page in terms of if I have a student in front of me, how do I assess that student to unlock that reading? We understand and know that literacy is a social justice issue. We know that reading unlocks many doors. And as a district, our focus, as we spent much of our administrative retreat speaking about, is how do we come together and get that vertical and horizontal alignment around core content of reading. Because we know literacy is needed when you start to go into content, comprehension. We're seeing it more and more when we start to spread out into math and to science. We also know that we have a writing issue, that our students are not writing. And in order to be a good reader and comprehender and critical thinker, you have to write. So these are all these different things that the science of reading talks about that we have to make sure that we are hitting upon so that students are able to become literate.
So what I'm hearing is, and I want to reiterate this for everyone watching, this is not a one-size-fits-all situation. And I think that my biggest takeaway is that young boys and girls that can't read end up where they shouldn't be. And the last thing we want for our kids is to just continue that generational cycle. So what I'm hearing is that there are plans, and they will be enforced, and it will be expected to be used with fidelity so that we can improve our scores, which would in turn make kids want to be here. Because again, when you're 14 years old and you are learning about the Revolutionary War, does it matter if you can't read? Like, does it matter? So I'm glad to hear that we do have the resources. I'm glad to hear that we're going to enforce fidelity. And I think as a board, I'll speak that if there's anything we can do to help, you let us know.
Thank you very much. Chris is chomping at the bit, but I want to say one thing to that point. Sorry. We use ARC as our resource because we have a very transient population. It is important that we use the same resources across our district so that if we move students for whatever reason across our buildings, the resource is a resource, because to have different resources, different core resources in different schools, that takes a student back. Because we have those opportunities where, if a child, moves from school to school, if a family moves, then they move into another elementary program, so to speak, and it's the same core resource. And that's the rhyme, that's the reason that we have one core program.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. I just love talking about the zones, horizontal, vertical. So since we're there, have we ever considered a parallel program at the early elementary level for early literacy? Because a lot of issues that we have, and I think it's very insulting conversation when people try to imply that we have literacy problems and we're not addressing them, because we are. So with the parallel option, the way it was explained to me, but I'm a lay person, so perhaps you'll go into it a little more in depth. But so that children don't get left behind, you have a parallel program with children who are not exposed to early literacy from that 0 to 4 range. So when they come into a pre-K level and they're behind, instead of holding them back, putting them into a parallel program, giving them extra resources to try to catch them up so that we can make sure that they're able to read by grade 3, because like they said, when you learn to read, you read to learn. And that 3rd grade number, I know it's very important with you. We've had that conversation. But could you perhaps explain that a little bit to the public and to our people that are listening?
So, yes. In addition to our daytime program, we use a lot of our grant programs, such as our 21st century programs, to utilize that opportunity to catch students up in the after-school space. We also have reading pull-out supports. One of the biggest intentions of having the coaches is to give the classroom teachers another hand to provide research-based practices in terms of literacy instruction. Reading will always need to be supported. We have an early literacy problem. It is important that we have those additional times and opportunities for our scholars. That is why we have Saturday programs, after-school programs, and extended school year programs to ensure that our scholars have additional reading opportunities. Did I miss anything?
No, the one thing I did just want to chime in on is that with the science of reading, when we look about it and when we talk about it and we look at it, it's a K-12 model. So what I mean by that is read aloud shouldn't stop after elementary school. Children need to hear the words. They need to understand the inflection, the tone, the mood within a reading passage, whether you're a senior, a junior, or a 6th grader or a 1st grader. So a read aloud is imperative. So the science of reading really looks at, those strategies that you're using at the lower grade level as well as the higher grade level, whether it's a read aloud, whether it's looking at vocabulary, whether it's, sitting down and having students think and share together and talk about the text, that shouldn't end when you get to high school. Because we've been saying this and we'll continue to say it, everybody's a reading teacher. You can't have a child sit in your classroom and go, oh, baby, you can't read, and just walk away. You've got to be able to help that student. So that's really what the science of reading is talking about. It's about creating that continuum, and it goes up. And when we look at our test scores and when we look at what our children are doing, we're seeing a disconnect in it going up.
I jump in because I just wanted to make this one comment. It's important to understand here, because I think we've not had this conversation, that when we purchased this resource in 2017, it was the only resource that had a Spanish version to it. Ms. Peterson, how many L students do we have in this district?
Over 2,500.
So this program is not a translation program. They don't take the English version and simply give you a translated version. The Spanish version is built on the syntax, grammar, and semantics of Spanish. It was designed by Spanish speakers. It is completely unique in that way. You'll find now that some programs have realized, oh, duh, like kids who come from Spanish-speaking homes don't have the same syntax and grammar as English speakers do. So if we abandon this, you're just abandoning something that's only available right now through this for 2,500 students. And it was piloted in Vales Gate for that reason, because of our dual language and bilingual programs. And when it was used with Fidelity, we saw the promise. If we don't want to remember, it was a CSI school that's now in good standing. It was piloted there for that reason. And I really invite you to look at the board of directors, board of trustees who designed the Spanish side of this, because they are the who's who of the educators in this country for our Latino families and communities.
This is such a great conversation. I see that we're all talking, but I'm a little older, so I tend to forget. So what I want to go back to you a little bit, Mr. Howard, thank you. When we talk about vertical and horizontal alignment, because we are a 3-tiered school district, it is really hard for us to get together. So because we have 7 o'clock school, 8 o'clock school, and 9 o'clock school, due to the transportation, because we're transporting all 12,000, it is sometimes hard for us to meet. So when we talk about vertically aligned, it's meeting from, grade level bands to make sure that we, support the continuum, but that is really hard unless we have a professional development day. But because we are so large, we don't necessarily have enough opportunities to do that. So if we had our wish, I would say that one of the things that we could, but it's so hard because that our educators also have their families, but one of the things that we believe would be beneficial is if we had some additional time on task for vertical and horizontal teaming, where teachers would have an opportunity to get together, right? Because then we can really plan the continuum, right? And we can see what's expected at every grade level for teachers to meet. But we're unique because we're so large. So it's, it's a delicate balance of trying to get everyone in the same place, particularly grade bands, so we make sure that students are prepared. And teachers know exactly what's coming, how they can be prepared, because it changes. It's not the same from year to year. We have different students, different opportunities, different challenges every single year. You're welcome.
One of the things we didn't answer for Mr. Howard was about that early learning piece. So that is where our community partnerships come in. Newburgh Free Library, the Armory, making sure that we do Newburgh basics, and making sure that our parents understand our collaboration with the hospitals around early literacy. And that's where our community-based partnerships and our FACE team comes in regarding what is needed for that.
One of the things that we did last summer, sorry, Ms. McKenzie. One of the things that we did last summer, we worked through curriculum and instruction. Some of our scholars at the high school level, they were trained in some reading strategies and worked at the Armory with our students on Saturdays. So we wanted to make sure that we had that continuity in the summertime with our scholars who were working in the library spaces or doing reading and literacy for our younger learners. So, it's a work in progress. We do all that we can. We look for spaces to improve and to continue, but we know that literacy is a big challenge because if, the students can't read, they can't really excel at anything else because everything is a reading test.
Ms. Boucher?
Woohoo. Okay, my questions are specific to like the SEPs themselves. I have like 5. So to clarify, a school only has to do a SEP if they're considered a school that's not in good standing, correct? So these plans themselves, do they get sent to the state? The state then sends them back either with approval or with comments?
So South Middle School SEP was already accepted by the state. These will all be accepted by the state because we use a rubric and we've met the measurement. So this is more or less a preliminary requirement that we're engaged in at this point in time. At a later date, each school will present their SEP to the board in full. There are quarterly checks throughout the process. I think I answered that correctly.
So the school improvement process is identified. These SEP plans we started working on these plans in the spring. When the ESSA accountability measures are released to the district, which was reviewed with the board at that time, we meet with the building level leaders. They select their school improvement teams to collaborate on what is needed based on the identified measures that is given by the ESSA accountability system. So we meet, they come up with strategies, we look at data. For NFA Maine, like we went through walkthroughs, you brought in outside consultants to try to get that pre-work started. Like, what are the things that we need to work on? What are the things that we know now in March, April, that we need to improve upon so that when we step foot in September, that we can start this change process for our students and for our families. So these plans are, I think it's been probably about 3 or 4 months that we've been working, trying to bring them together and develop a plan based on the data and the measures that have been given by the state education department guidelines.
And within each step, so they have either 1, 2, 3, or 4 commitments. Each SLT team consists of parents, teachers, administrators. They also look at their key strategies, their level of implementation, and how they're going to target that support. And then they have quarterly checks that they go throughout the year to say, this is where we're at, how are we doing? And then we also will do walkthroughs in the building as well.
Yeah, because I saw, so Bombville's was the first one that was like on the list, so if I reference that, it's because it was first. So like they have the 6 to 10 week rubric of like after school starts, 6 to 10 weeks, they have measurable goals for themselves. So do those get reported back to us, or is that an internal administration thing? Just because obviously these are schools that are not in good standing, so if we can review that data, I would like to.
So when the schools present, you can review that data then and they'll explain it. And then also what's within each step is they're looking at data from the past year, as well as historical data and trends within that school, within that building. So that's the data that they're looking at. So unfortunately, it's not current data, but as they go through the process this year, they will also examine their current data.
Okay, and then kind of piggybacking off of that, in each step, they have like requested either professional development or funds for stuff. So do we have plans in place for getting that done as quickly as possible? Because obviously you want to get your PD done not as fast as you can, but in a timely manner so that teachers can then inform their learning for the year?
It's part of their implementation plan. So whatever PD they've set up, they've kind of created an action plan, so to speak, so that they can be provided with that professional development within their PLCs or however they've determined and created an opportunity to meet that requirement.
And as far as the budget, the state funds certain initiatives. So then those plans are then approved, and it's all approved by the state, the SEP. If it's in alignment, then those funds are released.
And when they look for those professional development opportunities, it's aligned to those goals. And it's all approved because the monies come from the state. Thank you.
Ms. Boucher?
Thank you, Ms. Boucher. I also want to state, for the record, the professional development is not a one-and-done thing. Professional development is ongoing, and it's constantly evolving and changing, and it's prescriptive to what the needs are in the building. So I appreciate you saying, you want to get it over with. It's never over with. It's always ongoing, and that's a healthy way to be.
Victoria?
Sorry, there was another part to my question, and can someone just, how do I say this? In these steps, I see things called iReady. And iReady reading data showed XYZ. So for Bombville, for example, I see 55% of students were on grade level, 31% were 1 grade level below, 14% were 2 or more grade levels below. That's just for the school. Can you explain what these results are and what the data means?
So iReady is a diagnostic assessment. iReady uses the same New York State standards that we use in New York State. But it does not include a written component to it. So we have 3 iReady diagnostic assessments. We have what's called a BOE, which is the beginning of the year, a MOI, M-O-Y, which is the middle of the year, and an OI, which is the end of the year. I know, education loves acronyms, right? It's the alphabet. So the beginning of the year iReady diagnostic assessment in math and ELA is small passages and what we call right there questions that are within the passage. They are not what we would call higher order thinking questions, if that makes sense. They're not inference-based questions. They're questions that are within the passage that are what we call right there questions. I'll give you an example. You could read a story about a woman who had on a red dress and she was walking her dog, and one of the questions may be, what color was the woman's dress? It was red. It's right there in the passage. So iReady does assess reading, and it does give you a level for where your reading is for that student. So if it's a second grade student, are they reading on grade level based on the standard and based on the question? It's not a bad tool. It's a great tool. iReady also has a mastery level. So after those students are taking that assessment, they need to look at that mastery the teacher does. They should have meetings with the parents and go over the mastery, look at the standards, see where the student did with those standards, and begin to still create mastery levels for the student so that they can begin and continue to excel. If they're below their reading level, Lord, if they're below their reading level, it could be for many reasons. It could be because maybe over the summer they didn't read, or maybe that day they weren't feeling well. But whatever that reason is, that teacher is then still going to drill down and continue to work on those reading standards to try to bring that student up some more. So iReady is a great tool for math and ELA, and I say that because it really is, because it gives us an idea. It is something that is used in K-8. If we use it at the high school level, it's usually used with students with disabilities, but it does not assess writing. It just gives us a snapshot or an idea of where the student may be on that given day to support where we need to begin with instruction.
Could you talk a little bit more about the correlation and the rigor in iReady in terms of how it predicts where students are? And please talk about it as an intervention and not as a program, so to speak.
It's a great intervention, again, because it gives a teacher an indication of where a student may be. But it may not necessarily be as rigorous as other instruction may be. It's a tool to put in a toolkit, but it's not the end-all, be-all, or resource. Children should not sit on iReady and be babysat on it. Because sometimes the questions are not changed out as much as they should be. So I say that to say, depending on, when a question is asked, iReady will automatically, if the child gets that lower level question correct, it'll move it up to another type of question. But sometimes the questions may not be changed out over a longer period of time. If a child is just sitting on iReady for 30 minutes a day, they may be seeing the same questions over and over again. So it's not a teaching tool. It's just an assessment to diagnose where somebody is diagnostically to see if they can read. But it's not a program in this sense when it comes to the BOE, the OI, the MOI, and the OI, the alphabet. It's not something that should be used for instruction, but it does support and give you ideas of where your instruction needs to go. Fair enough?
Mr. Bear?
I think it's equally important when you look at the SEPs, and some do describe it, some do not. We also assess through ARC. We do conferencing, and there's a conference schedule. You'll see they will break students down by emergency level, students 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below. So I think it's important in our sort of cadence of assessment that we have multiple ways to measure. Why it's important to have both. iReady is essentially a computer-based approach. We also have to pay attention. Some kids don't take it seriously. And there are ways the program is able to kind of ferret that out a little bit. There's a rush signal you'll get if it looks like the kid took it too quickly and didn't really pay enough attention. But these kids have been doing this for many, many years. You sometimes get this sort of apathy about the program. It's something that our teachers are very attuned to. Conferencing under ARC is one-to-one. You're sitting knee to knee or desk to desk, and you're actually doing what's a conference. And teachers have been trained pretty rigorously how to do that. You're actually interacting with that student, teacher to student. You're going through a cycle of assessment that determines whether or not they're starting to make some progress. Out of that, kids make specific goals based on where they're at their level. So we level students in both ways, but they're very different in terms of their approach. What's important is that we have two ways of doing that because we want fidelity in our assessments. We don't want to be misled that students either are too high or too low. When we first got introduced to ARC, there was some concerns that there was a misalignment with iReady against ARC. After training, we're very glad to report that we do see consistency. So they both do tell us where kids really are developmentally in their literacy. Now remember, ARC is just reading, where iReady is reading and math. And that does not have a writing component, which is a very important component.
And I don't want anyone to get me wrong. iReady is a very useful tool, but it has to be implemented with something else. It can't just be something that kids just sit on. There's some great resources within iReady as far as their consumable materials. It really does give some great lessons and supports for teachers in terms of instruction with those mastery levels when they're looking to implement more student engagement at a higher level to create rigor. But it's just a tool, it's just a resource, but it's not necessarily a teaching arm per se.
Ms. Peterson.
I also just want to bring up in terms of when we're looking at this app and they're looking to kind of break down and look at those areas, and they're looking at different data points in order to help drive the changes in the development that they need to make. We definitely need to make sure that our scholars are critically thinking, right? So if we just base all of our if we base all of our goals or any of our professional development on just any one tool, we're going to kind of miss something else. It has to be kind of a pattern of different things so that we can drive the best possible instruction and provide the best possible interventions and support for teachers and students.
Okay. So roll call on resolution 4.3.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Splitty?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Resolution 4.5, can I have a motion
So move.
Second.
and discussion? Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So to the superintendent, as I read through this, as I read through the resolution, and I see the agreements with Orange County, so understanding being from emergency services, time is of the essence. When there's an emergency, there's an emergency. Do we have these same relationships? Right on time. Right on time. Right on time. Do we have these same relationships with City of Newburgh, Town of Newburgh, and Town of New Windsor? And the reason I'm asking this is because, Police Chief, you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about time. Time is of the essence. So if we have an emergency situation in one of our city schools or Town of Newburgh or Town of New Windsor, this relationship that we have with, that we're talking about with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, does it exist with the local authorities?
Yeah, yes, absolutely it does. That's why it's important we enumerated on the district-wide safety team that we have representatives from not only the 3 municipalities and the sheriff's office, but the New York State Police as well. So yes, I'm confident in the relationships that we have and their preparedness and response and the response times in the event of emergency. Did I miss any discussion about the agenda item?
4.5, so Mr. Howard just wants to make sure that if we have an emergency, we're not, if I'm reading correctly, we're not only relying on the sheriffs.
That's correct.
I can tell you that, you know, within the, I know you say 12 weeks, some days, the two into my 3rd year that I've been here, any time that we've had an incident, an issue, the city, wherever it is, whichever municipality, law enforcement shows up and supports us. So we do not have an issue getting our law enforcement partners to our buildings. They are very supportive.
Thank you very much. That was just my concern, because I saw with the Sheriff's Department, I wanted to make sure and ensure that we have those same relationships with our local authorities.
So that's a contract that we had last year as well. So we've renewed it. So we still have our relationships and our partnerships, but this was a resolution, maybe 2 years, Onyx, Ms. Peterson?
Yes, our relationship with the Sheriff's Department started when we started to have behavioral concerns at the high school. And we wanted to make sure that we had the presence on our campuses post-COVID, because we had a lot of incidents happening, and they are there to just act in support of those incidents. So this is an agreement that we came up just to support our operations and safety at the time.
Just for total understanding and clarity, so this is in writing. So the situations that may exist or may happen in the city of Newburgh, Town, New Windsor, I know we're located in those municipalities, so it would be automatic that they will come, but is there something in writing as this is in writing, or is it just implied because we're located in those areas?
So they would, if there's a large-scale event, they would come. They've been to every incident that we've had. They don't need a special arrangement. This just gives us the opportunity to have the deputies inside our schools. When we did approach other municipalities, it was a resource issue. It wasn't that we didn't approach, but at the time, the sheriffs were able to provide the support that we needed in our buildings. But if we have any type of event, wherever we are, law enforcement shows up. We don't need a special agreement with them to do that. They do that regardless.
So since we're there, if I may, have we worked on a mutual agreement with the city and towns in regards to services that we may exchange for in like-in-kind issues? Because I noticed, I'll give you a perfect example. Last year with the flagpole, when we had someone come here and complain about the flag not being up at the main campus. And when we reached out to the City of Newburgh Fire Department, they said that they could not do it because we don't have an intermunicipality agreement in place. Have we worked on something like that, or am I talking out of my head?
That may be a conversation for executive session.
My bad, okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call on resolution 4.5.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
I know this section is going long, but I did just want to mention one thing. Our NACA event, which is Achieving the Dream, they really wanted to thank the Board of Education for approving their facilities use. That event yielded close to 800 families a day in Achieving the Dream. They were happy with the turnout we had. People come from as far as Baltimore, staff, families from our community. were there, and it was a very successful event. They were very appreciative of the board, and they said they will be returning. We're a good location, and we definitely want to achieve the dream for our community.
Madam President, if I may, because I attended that, I went to that event, and I just wanted to say it was an incredible event. And going forward, since they do want to do something here again, would there be a way for us to reach out to our families and our communities to make sure that they take advantage of those opportunities? Because what I saw there that day and what was taking place was incredible. Incredible opportunities for people to become first-time homeowners. And I was embarrassed that I didn't really know enough about it ahead of time.
Right. So it was a short turnaround this time. We were approached and we jumped on it and we made it happen for the community. It's definitely something that they are committed to making sure that they advertise. And I have to say they were just appreciative of our promotion. And I think that's why we had so many families, walk through the door. So that was in part by our FACE team, our communications department, word of mouth, and just really trying to support and put it out there. Even though I was on vacation my last day, I made it back to go to the last day of the event, and it was just as packed that day that it was the first day. So it was a constant flow of just opportunity for our community. It was a good space where people got to see our community. They talked about the beauty of our community. So it was a very good thing. And the affordability of our community, because many of the people came up from the city, so it was a wonderful event.
It also, there were over 1,000 people per day at that event. It started at 8 a.m., ended at 8 p.m. each day. And we had posters all over town. We did robocalls about it, and it did come up very quickly. When Habitat for Humanity and NACA reached out to us, we jumped on the opportunity because we knew it would be really something enriching for the Newburgh community. And we do want to do it again. We really do.
Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to the clerk of the board.
Thank you, Madam President. For the clerk of the board tonight, we have the approval of 2 sets of minutes for the special meeting of August the 1st and for a regular meeting on August the 13th.
Does anyone want to separate any out? No? Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? Okay, roll call.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
So item 6.1 is the board goals for the year. Would anyone like to open up the discussion?
I'll open it up. I think we could open by saying, just a reminder that the board goals are goals established by the board, what we would like to do and how we commit to the district, but the board goals are not how to do it. How to do it is done by the person to the left of you. And with that in mind, I learned an awful lot about the reading programs tonight, more than I've learned in quite some time. And I think the most important thing we could commit to is early learning literacy. That we commit as a board to support the district and support the students of the district. But along with that commitment is the realization that how that is implemented is up to the professionals. I do have a professional to my left. She understands this very well when she's on the board. But generally on the board, that this is not what I do for my living. So we commit to the early learning literacy and also commit to hold the district's feet to the fire, that on regularly scheduled basis, we ask that we have data, and I don't want to fight for the data. I want the data. I want it to be shared openly, publicly, how are we doing? You know, I know we've talked about, we've had this program since 2017. How are we doing? We're implementing it in different schools this year. So that would be my goal, early learning literacy and accountability for it. Thank you.
Mr. Howard.
Yeah, so a big concern of mine, I think something that as a board we need to be mindful of and always consider is safety. I think that maintaining a safe environment for learning and teaching for our students, our teachers, and all individuals who are in our buildings and in our schools, i.e. support staff, just a safe environment for learning for all individuals that are in our buildings. I think safety should be a very important aspect of what we, for one of our goals.
Ms. Boucher.
To kind of piggyback off of Mr. DeRay, I think early learning literacy for sure, but I think also the implementation of a high school reading program. I know it was briefly talked about by Mr. Forget when he was here a few months back, but if we can get that started, and I think sometimes we want things to be perfect before they're implemented, but I think that in our case, in our district, that if we can start somewhere and then grow from there, that it's better to start with something, to have something for students, than to just wait until it's complete and ready, in my personal opinion.
Mr. Stewart.
Well, my big thing is attendance. Having the kids on the street is not a good thing. Having them in school is good. And I think we should think of ways that we want to make the kids want to come to school, you know, to enjoy coming to school, meet their friends here. So I'd like to come up with some sort of ideas to make the kids want to come to our district. I mean, we have great programs here. We got college programs. They're not taking advantage of them if they're not here. So, thank you.
Mr. Howard. Ms. Politi.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. And I will jump on this opportunity to piggyback on what you're saying because I'm thinking along the same lines. I'd like to see improvement in climate and culture and sense of belonging, and I think that's really going to affect attendance. You know, we're proud Goldbacks. Our kids are proud Goldbacks, but we want them to have FOMO by missing school. What's going on there? It's so fun. I don't want to miss a day. And how can we create that culture?
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. So I think as a district, we need to be committed to the needs of all students and through our current and our expanded programs. But I think we need to have a special focus on fostering culturally responsive teaching and learning. I think that is so important with the demographics that we have in our community, how diverse our community is, for us to not have a goal which would state that we are really fostering culturally responsive teaching and learning. Is so important.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close discussion on that. And we move on to 6.2, board workshops. I really would favor a workshop to address some of the complaints regarding the length of the meetings and what have you, but also, you know, for us, if we had a workshop before our meetings, then that's where we have our debate. The workshop does not have public comment, so it provides information, but that's where we ask all our questions, which would shorten our regular meetings. And they would also be shorter meetings. So, and the workshop is where we would have the executive sessions, so we wouldn't have to have, you know, long executive sessions. So I would like to suggest it to the board. Oops, Ms. Politi?
Madam President, can you please, when you say workshop, can you define what you mean by workshop and how it relates to board meetings and how it relates to committees?
Okay, well, the committees would bring their recommendations to the workshop. Oh, no, the committees would bring their recommendations to the board, okay, for consideration. But I just thought that a workshop.
So what does that look like? I don't understand what you mean by workshop, because there's a committee of the whole, which would be a workshop that would substitute a board meeting every other meeting. Is that what you're referring to? I don't understand the structure that
I
you're
just
referring
was
to.
interested in setting up a workshop.
So what does that
model.
workshop look like?
That's what I'm asking.
Is it in addition, what you're proposing, because you keep saying that you would like a workshop, is it in addition to our 2 regular board meetings per month? Is it in addition to committee meetings? Because I'm not understanding. your
Yeah, I was
structure.
thinking like a workshop before every board meeting. A few days, 3 or 4 days before the regular board meeting, we meet. It's a public meeting. People can come, but there are no public comments. This is where we get our questions answered and
how would you anticipate that to be a shorter length of meetings if we're doing an additional workshop meeting as opposed to a committee of the whole bi-weekly?
What I'm saying is if you have a workshop, you have a workshop for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, okay? Then you have your regular meeting is much shorter because your debate you've already had, and it's basically voting. And we have our executive session at the workshop rather than at the regular meeting. And so then you would have 8 meetings or 4 meetings a month. It may be an hour and a half for 2 hours, as opposed to the 2 regular meetings that are going 4 and 5 hours.
I would like to say, though, and I have addressed this before, that a lot of the reasons why these meetings are going for 4 and 5 hours is not because of the necessity of a workshop. It's really due to board members not doing their due diligence and reading the agendas and asking questions and being prepared prior to. We all have schedules, as was said by the public. We're volunteers, we signed up for this. We have homework to do. And whether or not we embed additional meetings into our schedules, it's not going to shorten the time if people are not doing their homework and their due diligence before they come to the dais.
That is not the point. We are doing our due diligence, and I prefer.
We're not when we're explaining the same thing over and over again, 4 and 5 times, and it still keeps getting brought up.
Excuse me, Ms. Politi. I want our questions to be, and our debate to be witnessed by the public. I don't like asking questions through email. The questions that we have, the public also has. That's why I want a work session or a workshop.
I disagree with you. I disagree on the sense that, yes, the public is needing information. But when we're debating the same topic over and over again, and you've received an answer, Madam President, and you want to debate it 4 or 5 more times, it's very inconsiderate, not only to the people sitting at this dais, but the people in the community who are waiting for hours while we're in executive session.
Well, we shouldn't be in executive session for hours.
It's still going to happen in your workshop model because you're saying that we'll be in executive session then.
Well, no, I didn't say we'd be in executive session. What I said is if we were going to have executive session, it would be at the workshop.
And executive session could be shortened in a workshop model or a regular board meeting model by people doing their due diligence instead of debating the same thing over and over and over again after it's been explained.
How does anyone else? Oh, Mr. Howard? Or Mr. Bugarelli? Mr.
So, Madam President, you said that discussion should be had out in open. Any questions that we have should be had out in front of the public. Nothing is precluding you from asking a question via email to the administration, and then you could ask that same question on the floor. There's nothing stopping you from doing that at all. And have you asked the administration and the lawyer, or the attorney, sorry, about how an extra meeting would impact their setup, their planning? We would have to then push agenda setting up a few days because we'd have to have agenda setting before the meeting. And then would that have to be posted before the workshop for the public, 24 hours before that? So now that's another day we're pushing it up. So we're already doing 4 meetings and we're pushing everything up like that. Have you spoken with the superintendent and the attorney to see how that would work?
This was just a discussion so I could see where everybody stood. I didn't say we were doing this. I've spoken with Mr. McCoy, and I asked, excuse me? No, well, yes, I did at the agenda setting meeting. Yes, I did.
And how do they support this? Do they support this?
No, I just said we wanted it up for discussion to see how the rest of the board felt about it. It's all. I just want more transparency. I want the people to be able to see.
I don't understand what transparency there is, what we're hiding from the public.
Okay, do you realize that on these agendas, we are spending public money, okay? I think the public has a right to know what it's being spent for, how we're paying for it.
And how does the meeting set up now stop us from talking about that in front of the public?
Well, you have everything set up by consent, which is fine, and oftentimes that's required. But I just think that there are some things that, people should know what's going on. It's their money that funds this district.
And nothing stops these meetings the way they're held right now from us discussing these issues.
But for the most part, they're not. Before I even got on here, there were hardly any questions asked. I mean.
What?
Yeah.
We never asked questions
On here,
about.
you didn't attend meetings, and you didn't watch them on TV either, or on YouTube, because you came and thought we exceeded the tax cap. You said it right at the dais.
Mr. Howard.
I just have a question. Mr. Borelli brought up the agenda setting. How would that work for this? Because in my opinion, if we're having a discussion, I think that should be done before the agenda is set, so we're not wasting time. So what would that look like? What would you want that to look like?
I just wanted to see what the model was, because I know it's been done in the past with the school board. So that was my question. I had as many questions about it as the rest of you. It was a suggestion, and I just think that it's important for transparency. Mr. Howard?
So, Madam President, first thing, I think what we need to stop doing, when you keep saying transparency, like something's happening that shouldn't be happening. That's not the truth. And for us to have discussions out here, I think this evening we had some very spirited discussions about the resolutions that are on the agenda. But I think when you say have a workshop and not be able to talk, it was asked 3 times, what does that model look like? What does it look like? Will we be having workshops where we can't, you said you want to have debate and want the public to see us have discussions, or I don't understand what you're referring to. I understand your past as a city council member and they do workshops, but this is education, it's totally different. And I think understanding that when you say you want to do a workshop and then you keep prefacing it with, you want transparency, you want the public to see we're spending monies, and I mean, that's not a good conversation to have, because it makes it seem like you think something's going on that shouldn't be going on, it shouldn't be happening. And if that's the case, please explain that. Maybe we can have a discussion around that.
That's not the case at all. The case is that I prefer to do things in the open rather than.
Well, what do we do tonight?
Oh, this was great tonight. This was very good discussion and everything, but what I'm saying is, look, if you're opposed to it, you're opposed to it. It's a suggestion, and that's what I wanted.
We simply just asked you, what does it look like? 3 people asked that, and you haven't answered it.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. It was done in the past. I don't exactly know what the workshop model looks like for the school district, but that's why I wanted to work with Matthew on that. He said he would help me with it, but it's a suggestion.
Maybe I can help you out. Ms. Limer has been here for years. Can you, well, you know what I mean when I say that. Ms. Limer, could you talk about the workshop model and how it happened and why we stopped it?
I don't know why we stopped it, but I can explain what it was when we did it. The workshop agenda that we went over, and as Ms. Bell said, the public could not speak at those meetings, generally was exactly the same as the agenda we would have the following meeting, which we would then have votes taken on. The purpose of having that agenda talked about one time was to either remove stuff, we didn't have enough information, to add information if there were questions. It was almost like practice. We practiced the board agenda and got the kinks worked out before we went into a session where you were voting.
But also, Ms. Limer, if I recall, the reason that we went away from that was because it was the agenda setting item meeting. The workshop meeting, and then we had the regular meeting. But because of time-sensitive issues,
Yes.
time-sensitive material that we could not wait 30 days to vote on because education is different than city government, we could not sustain that model for that reason.
That's correct, Mr. Howard. That is exactly why we did it. We had too many items to wait 30 days to get them passed. Yes.
Ms. Boucher.
So you kind of answered part of my question. I think actually last year, Ms. Politi was the one that brought up the workshop model, but it was never explained to the public. I think I understand the merit of having the discussion first, because I think just asking questions first via email, right, it doesn't offer the debate, right? So if you respond to it, and we get back, we do get the agendas, on a Friday, the meeting's Tuesday, so you're really talking 24 real hours to be able to go back and forth. So I think there is merit with having discussion and having that. I also understand the flip side that we all are volunteers and the cabinet is busy, so 4 meetings a month is a lot. So I think that there's going to be a question at Mr. Shaw. What do you see districts of similar size do? Do they do a workshop model? Do they do this kind of model? Is there a best practice for what works, what doesn't work?
Most districts do not meet 4 times a month. I can't think of one that does, and we presently represent over 40. Other models, some districts have a workshop early in the meeting, and then if the issues are released for voting at that meeting, they're voted on at the meeting. So I've seen that model, and that can work well. I think the other thing is the amount of time expended in discussion will also depend upon the number of board members. You're a 9-person board, your meetings are necessarily going to take longer.
Ms. Politi?
So that's what I was alluding to before. We call it a committee of the whole, not a workshop. And it would not be 2 additional meetings. It would substitute one of the 2 monthly meetings, and then the other one would be a voting meeting. But it's very peculiar to me that you would suggest a workshop, but you have, and you say that it's been suggested to you, but you have no idea how it works. So it's curious to me as who is suggesting this.
Okay, prior to even being, shortly after we were elected, there was, I think it was Orange County School Board Association. There was like a video conference, and the lady that did that video was saying how the workshop model worked so great for her school, her district. So, I knew it could be done if you wanted to. If you don't want to, then that's fine, but I just thought it was a good idea.
Mr. Shaw, are you, or I don't know if you're the appropriate person, but could we be presented the model that you just discussed of meeting first, then voting after if things were released for that? Because I think discussion bars, like if something should be tabled or postponed or whatever, so I think discussion is important in that way. And then that way, if it's up for a vote, if it's not up for a vote, we don't have to table it, it's just revised. Maybe not tonight, but for the next meeting, could we potentially have like a look at what that actually looks like?
Well, let me suggest this. On an agenda like that, the item is listed under workshop, and there's also a resolution already on the agenda.
Okay.
And if the board decides they're not ready to vote when it's on the voting agenda, they just table it when they get there.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. I think you should also be mindful, the model that you're referring to with a workshop and then a regular meeting would necessitate special meetings, of which you are not a fan of, when emergency things come up to be voted on. And that's why we got away from that, because 30 days to vote on items in the school district is just not enough time for things that come up on a time-sensitive manner, and we would need special meetings, and you are not a fan of special meetings.
I'm not a fan of special meetings when they're not time-sensitive items on the agenda.
By doing it this way.
I'm willing to do the work, that's all.
Really?
Mr. Bucarelli?
So if we went to the model to where we would do a board workshop before the regular meeting, what time would the board workshop start?
See, I didn't favor that.
Okay. But that's what the attorney has alluded to, as far as he's seen that out in the real world, not 4 meetings a month, which he hasn't seen. So that's my question is, when do we start that? Because if we're going to start that at 7 o'clock, because the availability of some members, now that pushes back the regular meeting to what time? And then what time do students can present their stuff? We're having students present at 9 o'clock at night, so what model really works?
That would be an incredibly long meeting, so I wouldn't suggest that at all. So if you're not in favor of it, that's fine. It was just up for discussion. So we'll move to 6.3, committee assignments. Ms. Politi, you asked to have that on the agenda?
I did, and as per Board Policy 2250, board members may request appointments to particular committees, and being that I am the only educator on this board, I request to be on the Personnel and the Curriculum Committee because I believe that's where my skill set is best utilized, and I believe that I have more experience than the other board members in that area.
Well, the committees were already assigned and voted upon.
And they can also be reassigned and revoted on.
Point of information. Ms. Politi was referring, she referred to the policy, and the policy specifically states if you want to be on a committee or if you don't want to be on a committee, that should have been part of the consideration, and that was not part of the consideration when you came up with the committees. You unilaterally came up with the committees. So that was in violation of the policy.
Yes, that was a violation of policy, and I'll tell you why. As you are all aware, there was no orientation for the new members. We weren't given any information. We were given no policies and procedures. We came here, we weren't introduced to anyone. We knew nothing. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until the end of July when we got the link for our regular training, and yet I had been on the board since early May. So we were left to, like every man for himself, sink or swim. So we were left to follow the breadcrumbs. And by the way, orientation is a board policy that was breached for some reason. So that's fine, but I would never hire a person, come into my store, they walk through the door on their first day, and I say, okay, get to work, and not show them around, not introduce them to anyone, not show them where they can find things. So, you know, we're not miracle workers. So yes, mistakes were made, but that's the consequence of not following the policy for the new members. And the senior members that have been on the board knew exactly what was going on. And you could have stepped up at any time to help us.
I'm confused as how you're saying that there was no reception for you. There was no reception for any of us when we were voted on. There was, and I don't understand how this correlates to you making unilateral decisions about committees. So we're rectifying that right now. There's a lot of victimizing. There's no victims here. You signed up for this job. We're all here. We all picked up our laptops. The policies are all online for everyone to look at, not just the board members. So saying that I don't know how to use my laptop or I don't know how to access policy is a you problem, not an us problem.
No, and the laptops that we received worked on alternate Thursdays, and we got them like 5 minutes before our first meeting.
Point of order, this is irrelevant. The piece that we're discussing right now are the committees, and I've made a suggestion and a request for the committees that I would like to serve on.
Well, do you want to do that in the form of a motion? Oh, Ms. Boucher?
So then I think from what Ms. Paletti is saying, can I suggest or make a suggestion as a whole that we, as every single board member, email the president to let her know what we want, if that's what the policy says? Right? Is that okay? And can we give it like a week time? Is that okay? Do we have to put that on the floor as like a vote? No, right? It is what it is, right?
Well, this is a discussion item tonight. For it to be an action item, it'll need to be on the agenda. And the agenda is set by the board president and the superintendent. So you can copy both of them on this matter. And then there may or may not be an agenda item next time. If there is no agenda item, this could be a special meeting issue, if you want.
Go ahead.
So all of us, we're all adults. I think that we can all send in an email and say what committees we want to be a part of, and I think you'll take that into consideration, correct? You'll take it into consideration.
Exactly. Mr. Howard?
Yes, Madam President. So since you took a liberty to say the more senior members what they didn't do, well, let me explain this to you. I've been on this board for 12 years, and most people, when they come on the board, they sit, they watch, they listen, they learn. They don't come in and start making decisions unilaterally like you did. And we have a past president sitting in the audience, and I'll tell you, when I first came on the board, there was no onboarding, and I've had issues with that, the way it's done. But new board members come on, they sit, they listen, they watch, they observe, and they learn. Some people choose to do it a different way, which you chose to do, and that is why you're going to defend making a unilateral decision that was against the policy. That's not a good look.
That is one of our policies, is orientation. And so that wasn't followed, and as a consequence, it was a negative impact. That's all.
You also made a lot of unilateral decisions without listening and learning. Let's not forget that.
Okay. Before you move on, I just want to understand. I know that you said that the policy says orientation. I want to answer a couple of things. No, I was not asked whether or not this works. For us, it would be taxing, and it's interesting because I had spoken to David some time ago because I know that these meetings are really long, and we talked about the requirements for a city school district and how many meetings we're supposed to, by law, required to have. We have two because we have a lot of moving parts. We're a large district, but essentially we are required by law to have one meeting per month, right? So to ask or to suggest without any conversation or any consideration for the professionals in the space as well, I think it's, it would behoove the Board of Education to really think about what that does to the staff on a daily basis, because the meetings, leading up to the meetings, there are a lot of things that occur, and, it really impacts how we run the district. And I don't want us to think this is a regular size district, or, we can pivot and move. Oftentimes the things that we have to do to be prepared for board meetings really take a few days to get things together. I want to be clear, I'm not sure who was supposed to orient you. Tell me what does it say in the policy? Who provides the orientation? Because we had a retreat and only some members came. So part of that retreat would have been a little bit of an orientation, because not only did we have the NSBA attorney there, but our own counsel was also in the space. So I do believe that would have been the opportunity for you to receive that orientation. So if I would have known that was something that you were seeking, perhaps if you would have said that to me, and then during that time that we had the board retreat, that could have been a subset of that retreat. So who was supposed to provide that?
It's in the policy. But as far as the retreat goes, the retreat wasn't held until the first or second week in July. I'd been on since May. And the retreat was held during the week when 3 or 4 of us could not attend without losing, having to lose revenue. And there have been retreats in the past, from what I understand, that were held on a Saturday. So I don't understand why, especially I would think you would want to accommodate as many of the new members as possible, when in fact only 2 of them were able to attend.
So the retreat, let me say this because I find that I have to repeat things a lot, so let me repeat it for transparency with the public. The retreat was done by the attorney, the executive director, who his only availability was that July date. I know that we've made this very clear to all of you. The board clerk sent out the information. This was the only date that he was available in July. And then he had an August date. So it's not a matter of me selecting the date. It's when the person who was leading the retreat, who does this, he doesn't do it for everyone. He is one of the best, and he elected to do it. That's the day that he recommended for us. That's it. I don't pick the date. I show up when they say to show up because it's important.
Mr. Bugarelli.
So I'm looking at policy number 2520, and it does say there is training you should complete, but it does not say a timeline. It says within the first year, and it doesn't say who is supposed to, do the training. So I would think it wouldn't be, you would still ask questions instead of just unilaterally making decisions and violating policy with that. So it's here in black and white, and you did read it correctly, but it doesn't say who, and it doesn't say by when. It just says within a year. So you didn't have to, it doesn't say anywhere that you have to have the training before you sit in the seat.
Exactly.
And all the policies are online, which you saw because you knew this policy.
Okay. Anyone else? Victoria.
So I think this election was a weird one. A lot of us came in for mid-terms. So for me, I never thought anything was really going to be customary. I will say, though, that going to that retreat did help. I think that the board members that did not get to go should sit with someone from NSBA to get that dialogue going back and forth. But I also will say that that was the only day he was available to come here, because back in July, I verified that was the only time he could come. So I think we have to work a little bit better together and get through all this, because this is the time. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, and item 6.4, board meeting start times. Mr. Howard, you asked to have that on the agenda?
Yes, I did, Madam President. I'm in favor of changing the meeting, going back to the regular time, 6. I just feel that it better serves the community, it better serves the board members, it better serves central office, who are here usually from 8 o'clock in the morning till at the rate of our meetings, sometimes to 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I just think it's a better opportunity for parents who have children, who want to come to the meetings, to then get back home and get the kids ready for school the next day. I just think it's just a better meeting time, 6 at the latest 6:30. That's my personal opinion.
Ms. Boucher?
So I've heard from a lot of sports parents that they actually appreciate the 7 p.m. start time because most practices go until 6 p.m. and then they can pick their kids up, bring them home, and then come here if they would like to come. So I've heard a lot more parents in favor of a 7 p.m. in that way, personally.
Ms. Politi?
I disagree. I have children who play sports in the district, and sports practices end at 5. And I will say, as a parent of 4 who works full-time and commutes, that starting a meeting at 7 o'clock and dragging it on with this until midnight is very inconsiderate to not only the board members, to the professionals that work at this table who have to get up the next day and serve, as do I, have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get my 4 children out, and go teach students all day, exhausted. And it's very disrespectful to the community who's sitting here waiting to be heard, waiting to learn, and you're dragging the meetings on beyond the children's bedtimes, and they have to get up and go to work the next morning too. This was another unilateral decision made by you without consult from the rest of us, and it's very disrespectful to all of us.
Well, I disagree that it's disrespectful because the thing of it is...
It's disrespectful to make
Excuse me, Ms.
unilateral
Politi.
decisions, period.
Excuse me. We have 3 and maybe 4 members of 4 new members who work until 6 o'clock at night. No one should have to, you shouldn't even want to consider imposing a hardship on your board members. We don't
You're
have...
imposing a hardship on everyone in this room by making us stay here this late at night and starting the meetings later. So you getting off at 6 o'clock, you knew you signed up for this. It's a 6 o'clock meeting, but we're supposed to drag ourselves here so that you can get here conveniently, and we have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning because you want to drag meetings on till midnight?
It's not just me. There are
Oh, it is
other
you.
members.
It is you and your puppets that you get to come talk here for you. And you can keep pointing the blame game, but we all know, we all see it.
Okay, fine. Well, the thing of it is, we do have people that work until 6 o'clock, and there's no prerequisite to be retired or to be a teacher and get off a little early. There's none of that. And it's not written in stone, the start time, anywhere.
You are not allowed to make unilateral decisions. We are a board of 9, not a board of 1 or 2.
I do want to note we had a discussion about it and a vote about it the meeting you were not here. We had a vote and McCoy called it in executive session. No, it was 5-3. There's 9 of us. Letitia was not here. We had that discussion as a group. So it was not a unilateral decision. I would just like to make note of that because it was a discussion and then a vote.
So,
May I just
I hope
jump
you
in?
didn't say what I thought you just said, Mackenzie.
She didn't.
Because she didn't.
Can we question?
Because that's not an executive session conversation.
Point of order. Can we question about executive level content? Because it was an executive level session content and it's not supposed to be spoken about on the floor. It was an executive session.
It's not confidential information.
May I just say one thing? Yes, I'm sorry. But just to say one little thing. I want us to be I know that this is a board meeting, but I want to also remind everyone that I am an ex officio member of the board, And at no time was I asked what an appropriate time would be. So I want to also say that in including our student body in these meetings, our high school scholars begin school at 7 a.m. If these meetings are moved to 6:30 or 7, I would not recommend having our students here because it is too late for them. So that will be a change to our meetings. We will not hear from our student body because our students sometimes wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock to wait and get on a bus. So I just want to let you know that's one of the ramifications. These meetings are late at 7 p.m. And I wish I was asked. I was not asked, but I just want to say publicly, it's a hardship for us. And it impacts our scholars and our district because we do have a lot of student performances, and our students come to the meeting, they come to every board meeting and they perform. If we have our elementary students, that's also late for them. So I just want to caution you if I'm asked, and I was not, so I just want to share out now publicly what that time impact does. I understand what you're saying, but I want you to also hear from the other side, from the educational side of the house. Thank you.
Mr. DeRay.
I'd just like to chime in on this, if you don't mind. 7 o'clock is very enjoyable for me. Personally, it is. I get to go home. I get to relax. However, I'm not here for me. I'm here for them and for the rest of the district. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that people have young children, which I no longer have. I have no commitments at night. I'll sit here till 2 in the morning if you want. It doesn't matter. I'll get up at 4. But I'm not here for me. And you made the decision for you. And that's a big difference. You say, because I can't be here at 6 o'clock, I'm going to move the meeting till 7. You said it. There's 4 people that can't do it. That should have been considered as part of running for the office. If for years I worked all over the country. I wanted to be on the school board, but I was cognizant of the fact that in my job, there's no notice. Someone calls you and says, we have a problem in Utah. You get up and go to Utah. So I couldn't do this. But my life changed, and I can do it. I can make the 6 o'clock meeting, and it's very important to me that people with young children, 1 hour difference to a young child, more importantly than, I'm big on the early learning, I'm also big on being able to get up early. It's very important that these children get their sleep, and yet you've just decided to add an hour to people's day. You added an hour to every administrator in the district. You added an hour to every monitor in the district. I don't know for certain, but I doubt if they go home and take the hour off in between. So we're probably paying 1 hour of overtime extra for doing this for transparency. So I'm back to 6 o'clock. I'm back to what the community wants, and I think that's real important. So thank you.
Anyone else? Victoria.
So me personally, I do work full-time. I work in a different area. I knew meetings were at 6, so as it stands personally, it doesn't bother me either way. I will say, from the community standpoint, from people I've spoken to, I've heard people here, a lot of them prefer 7 because it gives them the time in between to get done what they need to get done and then come here and do what they have to do. That's the viewpoint I've heard. I've heard both sides of the fence. I think that when it comes to this discussion, we need to also remember it's not just about the community, it's also about the executive team. So I want us all to hear both sides to that story. And that's all I ask, is that we hear both sides. Like I said, a lot of people in the community, I have a lot of Jackson's little friends are on Goldbacks youth football. They play soccer, they swim, there's cheerleading. A lot of those people get home at 6 o'clock at night and they're watching on YouTube when a lot of them would like to come down. So, and with that being said, a lot would be willing to come down to the Board of Ed, but they just won't get here in time for public comment. So that's the response I've gotten, and I just wanted to put that out there.
excuse me.
Mr.
We've
Duray.
had meetings starting at 7 o'clock, so where is that crowd we're talking about? I mean, if you're telling me
I'll
they
be
want
honest
to
with
come
you.
down.
I'll be honest with you. A lot of people don't want to come for fear of getting called out the things that we've been called. So I just want to put that out there. A lot of people are afraid to stand up there and say what they want to say. And I'm not discounting what anybody has said. I'm just saying that from where you're asking me where they are, some of them are afraid to come. Yeah, that's just the reality. Again, the time I planned for 6, I changed my whole work schedule to accommodate 6. And we went to 7, and I have to change my whole work schedule to accommodate 7. So either way, I'm also affected personally. I have a little one at home. I'm a single mom. It's not easy. My dad's 70-something years old. So for him to watch him is rough. For him to put him to sleep is rough. But I can't just base my opinion on one side of the fence. I have to weigh out both. So if weighing out both means that it's easier and better and more convenient to do 6, we do 6. If it's 7, we do 7. But again, we don't know till we do it. And I think right now, we've just spoken for an hour on just these things, when all of these could have been like an email, in my opinion. So that hour we just spent could have been done. So we have to weigh that out too. I don't want it this tit for tat thing. It's not to hurt anybody. It's not to do the wrong thing. But we need to listen and understand and actually absorb that information and make the right choices. Like I said, these items just took us an hour. It's 10:15. So.
So what are we doing with this?
Is it a vote or is it just discussion? I think it's just discussion. Do we want to make a compromise?
When you told the board clerk to change the meetings to 7, if you talk to the board members, you feel you get a consensus of that it should be changed, then you could just change it. You don't need it. It's not a policy.
Mr. Stewart.
I propose we compromise. Let's do 6:30 and see how that works out, and then we can always bring it back up again. I'll work on my schedule. It's difficult, but I will work on my schedule. If we do 6:30, at least it'll be a compromise.
What?
I'm okay with that.
Point of order, do we have to walk it on to vote on it? Okay, so. But we don't have to make that choice right now, this second. Okay, so then I suggest we move forward.
Okay, so turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent of, what? Oh,
Right now, it's a matter of agenda setting, so the two of you should probably have a decision on the time, right?
thank you, Mr. Shaw. And I turn it over to Mr. McLemore, our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 7.1 through 7.20 for your consideration on tonight.
Would anyone like to separate any out? Oh, Ms. Belletti?
7.1.
7.1? You mean 7.2?
7.1 and 1.
7.11, is that what you said?
7.1 N1.
7.1 says HR agenda items. I see that. So, all right. And what was the other one? Other one? That was it?
That's all.
Okay. Ms. Boucher?
7.18 and 7.19, please.
Ms. Boucher?
7.16.
Okay.
So right now we have 7.1 through 7.20 minus, or take out, 7.1 N as in Nancy 1, 7.16, 7.18, and 7.19.
Can I have a motion?
Can I separate out 7.20?
2-0? Okay. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? And roll call.
Mr. Duray,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli.
Yes.
So now we would be on 7.1 N1.
Motion to table?
Can I have a second?
Second.
And roll call? Oh, I'm sorry. Discussion, I'm sorry. No discussion? Oh, okay. Okay, roll
Mr.
call.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Politi,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello,
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher,
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher,
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli,
Yes.
Mr. Duray.
Yes.
Now we're on 7.18. Oh, sorry, 16.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Discussion? Oh, Ms. Boucher?
So I think, is this resolution, and I think the resolution before, for the events that happened last week? Because if they are, can just someone kind of give insight to why we approve this after the fact, or if, is there like a bargaining thing that goes into it, or if we can approve it, we can have this before the event itself next time?
You got it.
Ms. Peterson?
So there's sometimes situations with staffing where approved people unfortunately can't attend or can't commit, but we still have to have our event covered. And I think in both instances, I think there's a retroactive, so those individuals, in order to be paid, have to be paid retroactively. So I think there was 2 events where that occurred, where there were people that signed up that said they could, and then they could not, or additional staffing was needed.
Okay. Victoria?
Can I just say that the Jumpstart Jamboree was a great event? I was there, and they had, was it people from Nike? Was that like this?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was good. I just wanted to say that.
I'd love to talk to you
It
about
was-
the, I'm sorry, I got excited.
That's all right.
Jumpstart Jamboree is
So did
amazing.
my
This
son.
is the second year that we did it. It's for pre-K and kindergarten, and Nike has partnered with us. They are one of our community partners, and they provide services to our district that we don't pay for because they volunteer their time with us. We also had student volunteers from the basketball team, and pretty much everyone that there volunteers. And I really appreciate you and Mackenzie for coming out to the Jumpstart Jamboree. Thank you.
Those boys that play basketball, I don't know their names, but commend them because they were amazing with these kids. They interacted. It was, and my son's attention span is, and when I tell you, he was into the basketball, and it was those boys that got him wanting to do it. So, thank you. It was a great event.
Thank you. We had activity stations. We had the school bus out there so families would understand like how the bus works. You know, we went over the seat belts. We went over food and meal preps. We had different activities for students to participate in. And we gave away backpacks with a whole bunch of books in there for pre-K and kindergarten. And kids were excited. Parents were excited. It was pretty amazing. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, roll call.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Now we're on 7:18. Right.
Can I have a motion? A second. Discussion? Oh, Victoria?
Yes, if we can just, for both 718, I know I won't jump ahead. Can you just explain the position and why we feel that it's needed in the school?
Sure. The Director of Humanities it's an essential position in fostering like a rich, well-rounded education that emphasizes critical thinking, that it really can support bringing ELA and social studies together. As we talked earlier about writing across the content, this will further support that. This is a position that can really examine writing across the content area, higher order thinking, looking at student engagement, looking at literacy, looking at how students are also going through the writing process, not just in social studies, but in English instruction as well. So when we speak about humanities, we're not necessarily talking about the arts for this position, because we have an incredible arts director. We're looking at ELA and social studies and bridging that gap between it. Also, it's important to understand that this also will connect us to the literacy briefs, looking further, deeper at the curriculum, aligning it more with those literacy embedded instructional items and instructional toolkits that we want to create. And we really want this position to focus on a 6 through 12 lens to create that vertical alignment, to create those opportunities for teachers to get together across our middle school and high school buildings in ELA and social studies and examine what's in the content, what resources they're using, and how they can really create a more rounded focus for instruction with our students.
I know it's late. Also to add that, you know, when we listened earlier to some of the recommendations for goals, when you talk about spanning literacy and accountability for instructional outcomes, this Director of Humanities helps to also look at culturally responsive instructional practices and resources to further embed so students have connection with lessons and materials that they're studying and working on.
To create more interdisciplinary units of instruction as well, which is really, really important, so that students can focus on more real-world issues that are occurring across those content areas as well.
Ms. Peterson?
Probably one of the questions that would also be asked is how we're affording this position, and I think structurally, we have to look at what we currently have, and we have a current vacancy that we are going to use, so there'll be no change or impact on the budget.
Mackenzie?
So do I'm gonna piggyback 18 and 19 together just for this question. Do these two positions report into the CNI assistant superintendents? And have they, I'm assuming one, they're gonna be part of a hiring process that would occur. Have these positions been done before in our district? Have we seen them as beneficial, or is this us trying something new to see if this will work?
So I have to say that when I came in, I really reduced a lot of our directors, and what it really did was it crippled our curriculum and instructional program because we had a lot more content area directors. And so what we've noticed is that we no longer want to really help to support teaching in isolation. So a director for humanities really bridges and ties in thematically the English language arts and social studies. So it puts two skill sets together to show a bridge in terms of our instructional humanities program. The director of STEM, instead of a math and science, and to be completely, frankly honest with you, we were not attracting candidates for mathematics, and so we tried a different approach, and having a director of STEM really gets us the opportunity to put those two items together as well because they work.
Mr. Howard?
Yes, since my colleague went to 719, I'll just go there now also, if I may. So LOTE, language other than English. What does that look like? I know we have a large Spanish-speaking population. What is the percentage of our student population that's language other than English? And secondly, is this position going to help with our L worker, Dr. Beato, or is this going to be, this individual will do something totally different outside of Spanish?
So LOTE is languages other than English, and yes, so it works exactly with Dr. Beato. There will be an elementary lens and a secondary lens, but as we know, our L population is our largest growing population, and it is our largest population of scholars in our district. So we need to add some additional support because we talked a lot today about, our areas of where we need to add support, and ENL is one of those areas that we need additional support because we have scholars who are not only trying to master content, but also English language arts.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, which might be a dumb question, but I got to ask it. So language other than English. You just spoke to how depth the L language is. Would this have been better instead of an FTE, just giving an assistant position to Dr. Beato?
So a director level and depth and qualification and skill is perhaps more intentional and more of a managerial to support our teachers in terms of instruction. We do currently have a teacher on special assignment, but please understand that teaching and coaching is a different level from managerial and directing, right? So as a teacher, I can't direct other teachers in terms of what to do with instruction, but as a director, we can provide different levels of support.
Okay, so let me encapsulate the question I'm trying to ask. Is there enough work for a full FTE for LOTE outside of Spanish?
100%.
Okay.
Probably 2 additional ones. We have a lot of students with a lot of need.
Okay.
There's also the development and maintaining of language other than English programs. So that's the recruitment, the development, getting students in, redoing the curriculum. So there's the language other than English part, the actual English-speaking students that are learning another language. So that's a body of work, trying to make sure that we work on that to retain students in those programs because we're having difficulties with that. And then there's that bridge over to L literacy, L learning. So it's both things, and it's a large body of work with a growing population that is in need of more support.
So last thing, so I'm gonna go back. So I'm going back to the times when we used to offer French, Latin, what was the other ones? French, Latin, German. So are we going back in that direction, or is this something because I guess what I'm not understanding, language other than English, and when I asked the question, will this be someone to help Chastity Beato with the Spanish speakers? And we said no, but there is enough work for FTE for a language other than English, not Spanish.
So it's a little bit, it'll cross over into both, and we absolutely have a need. We have a great need. And if you remember last year, we tried to do a grow our own, but we did not have any takers, right? I think this is perhaps a nationwide issue. We do not have enough teachers for our English language learners, and this director will help us with strategies to support our ELs and students in other languages other than English. So it works with, this position will work with Dr. Beato.
Roll call on 7.18.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
No.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
No.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Politi?
Yes.
The item passed.
Item 7.19, can I have a motion
So move.
and a second? Discussion?
Just did that.
We still have to do roll call, right? For 719, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, roll call.
Ms. Christine Bello?
No.
Ms. Thomasina Bello? No. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. No. Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Okay.
720.
7.20, can I have a motion
So moved.
and a second? Discussion? Oh, Mr. Duray?
Thank you. The reason I separated this out is because I don't want it lumped in with many other resolutions. The tenure for 18 people is extremely important. One of the things I've learned on the board is what a milestone this is in people's careers, and how fortunate we are to have these 18 people on our staff and achieving tenure. So I would just like to recognize them, and that's why I wanted to have the discussion. Thank you.
Roll call?
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items.
Thank you. And
So tonight we have items 8.1 to 8.14 for consent.
okay, would anyone like to separate any out?
Can I separate out 8.9 and 8.13?
Excuse me, did you say 1-3?
Yes.
Thank you.
And 8.9.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so on resolution 8.1 through 8.14 minus 8.9 and 8.13, can I have a motion? Okay, discussion or roll call? Roll call?
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Resolution 8.9. Can I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Discussion? Mackenzie?
So I just want to make note, change orders happen, I understand that in the world of construction. Can we ask the superintendent on all of these projects, not you, the construction superintendent, to provide like a lessons learned? Because at the end of every construction project that encounters anything, most subcontractors can supply a list of like, we could have done this better, we could have done that better, and that document can help better inform our future RFPs and how we budget for them. So if they could just provide that, that would be great.
In one of our upcoming meetings, we will have our consultant make a presentation to you all. Are we only doing this in exec, David? With Mr. Thurnow? So please feel free to respond to those questions. There are some litigious pieces, and that is why it will be done in executive session. But that is that's a perfect question to ask as he is leading our project, and he'll be able to provide you with the resolution.
Anyone else? Okay, roll call.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
8.13. Can I have a motion
So moved.
and discussion? Mackenzie?
So I see the Rosetta Stone program in here, and obviously this is finance, but in the world of data, like, do we have the measurable data that this is working for RL students? I think in general, people would probably want a teacher instead, but I hear what you're saying, that measure of people having the ability to do that or wanting to do that are low. So I just want to make sure that in using this, that it's being used well and actually working.
So the reason why this is in the finance section is because there was a request for bid. So we are a non-component school district. So if a BOCES does not have a certain product, or if we're trying to obtain a product at a lesser price, we have to do a request for proposals. So that's why it's in the finance program portion of the agenda, because we're accepting the proposal on the cost of this instructional technology. So the Rosetta, the Lexia and the Rosetta Stone program, they're programs that are for our learners, and it's actually curriculum. And there's lessons, there are research design, we have usage, we track the usage of our instructional programs. They provide lesson printouts, parent reports, and all of those different things to help with language acquisition. We can see those results within our middle level with the amount of students that have been able to test out commanding, expanding, and the growth within our ELs that are here. I know we mentioned an EL student. These are some of the products that he used to build his capacity, fluency, and his language understanding. So, these are top products within the industry and resources that we're affording our teachers and our students.
One thing I want to say is that these resources do not replace teachers. They're things that teachers use to support their instruction.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
I'd like to add a motion, but I need an executive session.
For what purpose?
For purposes of the contract and based on legal. Legal advice.
For what?
For the purpose of the resolution that I need to add. Usually we discuss before we add a resolution. You want to do it after? Okay, that's fine. I just want that I do have a motion that needs to be added. That concludes the items for the section.
We're on 9.1.
Turn it over to Dr. Mack, please, for...
Thank you, Madam President. I have item 9.1 for your consideration.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasino Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you. I also have items 10.1 and through 10.5 also for your consideration, Madam President.
Would anyone like to separate any out? Okay, can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second. And roll call. Oh, yeah, roll call.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasino Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Madam President. The Exceptional Learner Division has two items, 11.1 and 11.2, for the board's consideration.
Would anyone like to separate any out?
Yes, Madam President, I would like to strike 11.2. It's duplicitous. It's already...
It was already voted upon and approved in the finance side. It's a duplicate.
Okay, I'm not following. What are we doing
So
here?
remove, what's the proper procedure?
To vote to table the second time it's on the agenda.
Okay.
Move the table.
And can I have a second?
Second.
And roll call.
Ms. Thomasino Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes. Okay. 11.1, can I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
And okay, discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasino Bello?
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Can I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
And second, and roll call?
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Duray?
Yes.
The board may take action after executive session. Thank you. Okay. Can I have a motion to return from executive session?
So moved.
Okay, roll call?
I'm in extra slow motion at the moment. Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Ms. Peterson?
The motion reads as follows. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes its president to sign an agreement with the architectural firm from CHR to perform project services regarding the New Windsor Elementary School, SED number 44-16-00-01-02 to 1010. As presented at the board meeting this evening, a copy of said agreement shall be incorporated by reference within the minutes of this meeting.
Oh, can I have a motion?
So moved.
And discussion? Okay, roll call?
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
So that was the resolution to add. Now we have to vote on the resolution. Correct, Mr. Shaw? Yes. Okay. So we need another motion and a second.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Is that right? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Christine Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Thomasina Bello?
Yes.
Ms. Mackenzie Boucher?
Yes.
Ms. Victoria Boucher?
Yes.
Mr. Bugarelli?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay? Mr. Howard? Mrs. Politi?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?